Chapter 1406. At every moment it was changing. Everyone was doing their own thing. If there was a protagonist, it would be no one. It would only be time, the all-embracing time. Later, it would become history. Doni woke up in a nightmare. There was no one around. She sat on the soft mattress alone. So, where was this place? She remembered that she left the number 7 dormitory to look for Mina, and then came to a villa outside. Oh, she also remembered that she met several noble masters. And then, the sudden headache stimulated the girl. She hugged her head with both hands. The noble master, who liked to call her by her name, the father, who had always loved her and whom she was very attached to, was dead. She saw it with her own eyes, dead. She would never see her father again. She would never be called by her father again. Doni was a child without a father. Such a duoni, she got off the bed. Perhaps she didn't even know where she wanted to go. It was just a simple thought of moving. When she opened the door and looked at the empty corridor, she suddenly thought of what she was going to do. She was going to see her father. She was going to the square where her father was beheaded. There was thunder and lightning outside. It was the battlefield between Kelowna Shinryu and the maid of the club. It was the place where Busby and Meow were chased. It was a place full of dangers. But she didn't know these because she just wanted to go to the square where her father was killed. Father Baboki, Doni will come to you soon, father. She wanted to go there. She walked out of here barefoot. When Shinryu returned to the villa in Kelowna, he couldn't find the girl. The black flame was just a seed of power. It was planted in Meow's body by Miss Maid, to satisfy her desire as an avenger. There were 2 restrictions. The target could only be killed by vampires, and if the target was killed by someone other than a vampire, it would bring about its own death. The price was that most of the vampire's soul would be offered as a sacrifice, and only a small part of it would be used to drive the black flame. This was not Boss Luo's usual style. It was just a temporary supplement made by Miss Maid because she felt that her master's lifespan was suddenly decreasing. Miss Maid really couldn't bear to see her master's lifespan decreasing. She just wanted him to exist forever. Although her master liked high-quality souls and bright souls, it didn't mean that Miss Maid liked them too. She just liked to accompany her master to do what he liked. Before that, she was still a Miss Maid who had worked in the club for hundreds of years, so she knew how to get more sacrifices quickly and efficiently. And her master was still tolerant of her as always, right? That was why there was Maiko now, a mortal who had mastered a terrifying power and had become a puppet of this power. Whether Maiko could wake up or not was not something that the servant girl cared about. In fact, Miss Maid was so ruthless from the very beginning. After all, she was the only one in many worlds. She was the girl of Orleans, the holy maiden who was respected by the whole country. But at the same time, she was reviled by the world and brought terror to the world. Therefore, for Miss Maid, it was good that Meow could hold on. If Meow couldn't hold on and died, it wouldn't be much worse. If she didn't have this chance, she probably couldn't walk out of the farm. Her original fate would not be free from misery. What she would encounter might be more desperate than despair. On the balcony of the villa, Miss Maid, who had just returned after beating up the true dragon of the divine land, silently watched the flame giant moving in the black flame. There was no emotion in her eyes. She was just quietly calculating the harvest of Maimao this time, calculating how much of her master's lifespan could be restored by these harvests. She just looked at it, but the switch on her body made a noise. Was Kelowna Shinryu weak? How could he be weak? She might be the limit of this planet. She was not in Kelowna because she didn't have unlimited power. The power she could use was still the strongest. But Miss Maid's body was just a puppet made by alchemy. The materials used to construct her body couldn't bear the power of the white flame. If the illusion on her body was removed at this moment, her limbs would already be filled with cracks. But she didn't care at all. She just smiled. I've recovered a lot. It was such a satisfied smile. The reason why Boss Luo didn't stop Long Shirua and Yu Yi was not because he didn't have enough time. Miss Maid came to his side, as long as she wanted him to, he was the same, because he gave her such a convenient ability from the very beginning. He was just curious that his Miss Maid could be so active, curious that she didn't deal with the problem in a more appropriate way as usual, but chose to fight directly. He always thought that Yu Yi was a treasure that couldn't be discovered. Until now, there were still many unknown things about her that were waiting to be discovered. Sometimes Luochio also thought that, if he didn't have such a continuous life, would he have enough time to know everything about her in his normal life? And a normal person's life was only enough to love one person. Feeling that his life was almost recovered, Luochio planned to continue to remove the restriction of neglecting to search on himself. But he thought about it and decided to put it aside first. If there was another sudden consumption of a large amount of life force, Yu Yi would be worried. If Miao was just Miss Maid's usual method, then when she was worried, it was unknown whether she would do something out of the ordinary. However, since he had begun to notice that he should know more about the previous owner, since the original idea had been revived again, it was equivalent to opening a gap. This matter could be put aside for now. The burning black sea of fire in the farm had unknowingly extended to Luochio's side. But they wouldn't hurt him, they would just go around him. He looked up and saw that in the night sky, Busby had opened a barrier like a barrier to resist the giant palm of the flame giant. The barrier successfully resisted the erosion of the black flames, but the pure impact made Busby's body fall directly into the street of the farm. A big pit. In the pit, Busby spat out a mouthful of blood and quickly got up. He fell not far from Luochio, but at this time, he didn't notice that in the middle of the burning street there was a pair of eyes looking at everything. Busby quickly observed everything around him. There was no one on the street. Obviously, his subordinates had completed his orders, evacuating all the crops and related personnel in the farm. This was the only good news so far. But if the black sea of fire couldn't be extinguished, it would spread to the high wall and eventually affect the mating farm and the slaughterhouse on the other side of the high wall. If the farm was for the use of the higher nobles and was the embodiment of their privilege, then the slaughterhouse was the real granary that stabilized the clan. He could only beat the vampire killer here. Busby narrowed his eyes. The flame giant approached step by step, and the buildings couldn't stop its footsteps at all. The moment they met, they melted directly. He coughed out a mouthful of blood again, but it wasn't caused by the internal injuries. After consuming the essence of Marquis Gouda, his body finally adapted to the power, and after a short period of transformation, he coughed out the filthy blood. Busby wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and felt the different power in his body increasing. From now on, he was truly improved. At this moment, Miho, who was in the middle of the flames, had blood vessels appearing in her eyes. Her eyes were red, and her beautiful hair was stirred by the flames, standing up one by one. She waved her hand, and the flames actually raised her arm and slammed it down viciously. Busby didn't dare to be careless. He took a deep breath and spread his wings to fly up. At the same time, he also took out the clan's authority from his waist. The clan's authority had great power against the vampires in the clan, but against non-vampires, it was just a normal authority. But when it was forged, a special attribute was mixed in. Indestructible. This was a special magic spell that was added to the authority. Of course, there was nothing in this world that couldn't be destroyed. The attribute of indestructible was just a trick that allowed the authority to have a high-speed automatic recovery function. At this time, when all the humans in the farm had retreated, Busby, who had also finished digesting Marquis Gouda's power, finally had time to think about how to deal with the vampire killer. Busby already had some ideas about how to deal with the terrifying black flames. At this moment, his speed had been greatly improved, and it was obviously much easier for him to dodge the attacks of the flames. Busby began to wander around the area, and at the same time, he kept dismantling the materials on the buildings in the area, using them as throwing weapons. There was only one target, and that was the vampire killer inside the flame giant's body. The wildly thrown building materials were directly burned into ashes in the flame giant's body before they could even get close to Mihio. It seemed that this method couldn't hurt Mihio at all. But if one looked carefully, they would discover that every time the material was thrown, it seemed to advance a little bit. And with the different materials used, the depth of penetration would also change slightly. Even the speed of the throwing could affect the distance of the object. As long as it wasn't directly vaporized, there would be a short breakthrough no matter what. Suddenly, Busby's eyes focused. He had already tested all the materials that could be experimented on once, and he had a plan in mind. Against the rampaging vampire killer, Busby became even calmer. He was still throwing different materials. Unbeknownst to him, the flame giant was no longer deliberately blocking those things, because those things were not threatening, until a certain non-threatening material was burned into ashes in the flame giant's body. But this time, it was different because suddenly, something continued to shoot out from the ashes. It was the clan's authority of the Teridio clan. It was hidden in the building materials, and at the moment when the materials were burned into ashes, it had a second breakthrough. The flame giant's fire instantly melted the clan's authority, but its own special property allowed it to recover the moment it melted. In the blink of an eye, it had already undergone multiple transformations between melting and repairing, and in that instant, the clan's authority had pierced through Magong's shoulder. Busby couldn't help but feel pity in his heart. He hurriedly retrieved the clan's authority that pierced through Mihio's shoulder, but the clan's authority that he retrieved was now in a state of cooling after melting. It couldn't recover to its original state. Perhaps the special property of the authority had been destroyed by the flame giant's firepower after this incident. Busby, Mihio, who was stabbed, suddenly seemed to wake up a little. At this moment, she was holding the wound on her shoulder with one hand, dragging her staggering steps, and driving the flame giant step by step toward Busby. He had to step back, looking for the next possibility. But at this moment, the flame began to shrink at a speed visible to the naked eye, as if it was starting to run out of energy. Busby narrowed his eyes and stopped himself from retreating. He felt that there was a chance of victory. Busby! Unexpectedly, Mihio, who was inside the flame giant, suddenly let out a shrill scream. The shrinking flame giant expanded again and spread out, spewing out dozens of tornadoes. Busby's attack woke Mihio up from her madness after being injured, but at the same time, Mihio stopped attacking randomly. I fell into a trap. Busby was terrified. At this moment, the flame was about to reach him, and he couldn't even dodge. In a hurry, he could only open up a shield to block the flame outside his body. Layer by layer, the shields were directly burned away. It was now completely close to Busby's body. He had no choice but to bite down and use the last of his strength. The potential that was forced out caused his muscles to swell, even tearing apart the clothes on his body. Finally, the black flame swallowed him. The moment the black flame finally succeeded in swallowing Busby, it was also the moment it spread out. A figure fell from the sky, and at the same time, Mihio fell directly to the ground. The flame had actually spread out from her body automatically. Bang! Busby finally fell on the street. He was like a bloody man, and almost all the blood vessels in his body were broken. Obviously, he had reached some kind of limit. One more second, no, half a second. At this moment, he couldn't help but feel lucky. If this killer didn't go berserk and use his strength indiscriminately, perhaps the result would be different. Busby coughed violently and got up little by little. He couldn't even stand up, but at least he survived. The vampire's control of blood was like an instinct. The blood that burst out from the blood vessels began to flow back into his body. It didn't even require much strength, it was just like breathing, but the healing of the wound was obviously incomparable with normal conditions. Obviously, he didn't care about the wounds on his body, but he saw the bite on his body. Busby was stunned on the spot. He looked at his body, his chest, his arms. Even when he reached out to touch his shoulder, he could feel the obvious bite marks. These were the bite marks left after his blood was sucked. But he, as a vampire, why would he have such bite marks on his body? The moment he realized these bite marks, Busby suddenly felt extremely dizzy. He slammed his head hard, hoping to get rid of this feeling. At this moment, something penetrated his body from behind. It was a sharp blade. Vampire, go to hell. It was David and the tang sword in his hand. Backstab. Chapter 1407. Of course, the current David would not let go of any chance he got. He would do anything to get what he wanted. He had never thought of ambushing Busby here. In fact, after waiting for Meow Meow for so long, he had given up on wasting time. Instead, he chose to work with Renas to enter the mating farm through the high wall. His target was the slaughterhouse at the back. Slaughterhouse was the factory of pure blood products. Every day there would be blood products of different quality being exported. Even though a slaughterhouse was heavily guarded, it was much more relaxed than a farm, which was the most valuable place in the game. Renas agreed to David's idea almost immediately. Originally, she wanted to use this opportunity to escape from the farm and head to the worry-free paradise that the Revolutionary Army had created outside the farm. Both of them hit it off. However, what they did not expect was that when they came out of the sewers, what greeted them was the farm, burning with black flames, and the confrontation between Meow Meow and Busby. David soon learned about Busby's identity from Renas. Renas was shocked that Meow Meow could destroy the farm to such an extent. Is she really a human like us? She was, or at least she used to be. David only answered Renas's question in his heart. He did not even have time to talk to Renas because a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity suddenly appeared in front of him. Because of his relationship with Renas, he already knew about Busby's position in the clan. He was the person in charge of the entire clan's patrol team. Although Busby's position was not as high as the higher nobles, he had real power. He was the one with real power in the Torito clan. That was enough for him. Vampire, go to hell. When the tang knife successfully pierced through Busby's back, David held his breath. He did it, at the moment when Busby was at his weakest. Before this, David had already successfully killed a vampire. It was a satisfaction that he had never felt before. Now, he was able to kill another one with real power in the clan. He did not know what this feeling was. He only knew that he was excited like never before. Even a powerful vampire died in the hands of a weak human like him. Yes, it was the feeling of trampling a powerful guy under his feet. It was so irresistible. So there are people like you in the Revolutionary Army. David, who was in ecstasy, couldn't help but be startled because the voice came from the front. It was Busby who was stabbed in the back by him. David couldn't help but be shocked. He subconsciously pulled back the tang saber that had pierced into his opponent's body. However, at this moment, the tang saber seemed to have been clamped down by an iron clamp. It didn't move at all. Busby reached out and grabbed the blade of the tang saber. Still struggling? You damn vampire! David snorted. You didn't expect this, did you? To think that such a day would come where the one who had always been a slave under your control would personally kill him. How many of our compatriots have died in your hands? Today. I will avenge them. Go to hell. But David was still unable to remove the blade in Busby's body. Busby's hand that was holding the blade had been cut by the blade, and blood was flowing out. Facing David's roar, Busby, who felt his stamina draining away, suddenly said weakly, "Is that really all, human? What did you say? Is it really just for revenge and not for other things?" Busby lowered his head and said, "The smile on your face is like the audience in the arena." David's pupils suddenly contracted. because, no matter how much hatred and anger were revealed in his eyes at this moment, the bottom half of his face showed a strange smile. "There is no need to know the truth at all. What did you say?" At this time, David only felt a huge force hit his chest. His ribs seemed to have all broken in an instant. Even when he was flying backward, blood kept spurting out of his mouth. He landed on the ground, but like a stone floating on the level surface, he kept drifting and finally hit in front of a pillar. David, who stopped, coughed out a mouthful of pus and blood again, but he couldn't get up. He struggled to get up several times, but all he got was endless pain. At this moment, Renace, who was with him, didn't dare to show herself. She just covered her mouth with both hands, curled up her body, and hid in the shadows of the street, trembling. Busby walked step by step toward David. His chest was still stabbed with the tang knife from the back. Blood dripped down the blade and dripped to the ground. In the end, he arrived in front of David, who could not get up from the ground. Busby could barely stand, his body wobbling, but compared to David, who was like a pile of mud, he still had a great advantage, or so it seemed. David didn't give up. He reached for his waist with difficulty, but soon his face showed fear. The dagger that was supposed to be at his waist was gone. David's heart was beating wildly. That dagger was dropped when he was drifting on the ground, and it was a few meters away from him. If you want to kill, just kill. David's eyes suddenly dimmed. He actually thought of begging for mercy, but he knew that it was useless. Since begging for mercy didn't work, at least he would make himself look braver. Since begging for mercy didn't work, he hoped that his bravery could be seen or known by others, spread to the Revolutionary Army's base, spread to that person's ears, so that she wouldn't forget about him. Busby slowly stretched out his hand. The fingernails of his 5 fingers instantly changed into sharp blades. David subconsciously stopped breathing. He heard his crazy heartbeat, thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. Wait a minute. I can tell you where the Revolutionary Army's base is hidden. I can work for you. Finally, there was a smile on Busby's face. It wasn't a sneer or a sneer. It seemed to be meaningful, but it made David tremble with fear. You, actually aren't as brave as you look, Busby said as he stretched his finger to his lips. Really? I can tell you all the information about the Revolutionary Army. The leader is a woman. Her name is Marlowe. She was originally a crop cultivated by the Norfeller clan's farm. You should be able to find out. Do you hate vampires? No. I don't hate them at all. Really. I can't find a reason to hate vampires now. Why should I hate them? They are so powerful and noble. David propped himself up and knelt in front of Busby. Noble lord, please allow me to tell you more about the Revolutionary Army. Open your mouth, Busby said slowly. His voice was so hoarse that it was like the wind whistling through the gap of a door in the middle of the night. David swallowed his saliva. At this time, he could only brace himself and obey the other party's order. His chin trembled and opened little by little. At this time, Busby suddenly bit his finger and stretched it in front of David's face. A drop of dark red blood dripped from his fingertip into David's mouth. When he saw this drop of blood begin to grow bigger in Busby's fingertip due to the tension, David's heart beat wildly again. His mind even went blank, until this drop of blood flowed down his throat like burning charcoal, all the way to his body. David painfully grabbed his throat and coughed crazily. Blood. The blood in his body seemed to be boiling at this moment. David felt an unprecedented burning sensation, as if his soul was being burned. He howled crazily. His body even forgot the sharp pain from before and began to twitch and roll on the ground. Since you hate vampires so much, then from now on, live as a blood-sucking monster. Busby silently glanced at David, who was being tortured at this moment. After leaving this sentence, he slowly turned around and left this place bit by bit. He still had the tang knife in his body. He couldn't take it out, at least. He needed someone to pull it out from his back. But he didn't seem to care. His footsteps became more and more staggered. He even bent his waist and crawled forward. He passed by the place where Megaflo had fallen. He glanced at Megaflo, and he knew she was still breathing. He saw the faint glow of the fire on her cheek. But Busby still didn't care. He just walked forward, dragging his body forward, until he disappeared in this desolate street. Later, Boss Luo removed the zero perception on his body and slowly came to a place where David's dagger fell from his body. Luochu bent down and picked up the dagger, then glanced at the direction where Busby left. Boss Luo suddenly threw the dagger forward. The dagger finally fell beside David. At this moment, David's body had stopped twitching, but he still looked like he was in pain. He even kept clawing his face, leaving streaks of bright red blood marks. Clang! He heard the sound of the dagger falling in front of him. David looked forward. He saw the mysterious traveling merchant. He couldn't help but remember that he secretly stole the dagger from the traveling merchant. David's breath suddenly stopped. But Boss Luo didn't say anything. He just looked at David and revealed a smile. He just stood in front of David with a smile on his face, retreating step by step, and then gradually disappeared. David only felt that his breathing was about to stop. How long did it feel like he was suffocating? He felt a chill on his back. The fear even made him temporarily forget the burning feeling when the blood in his body was assimilated by the vampire's blood. He looked at the dagger in front of him and subconsciously reached out his hand. Trembling, he still didn't dare to really pick up the dagger. What does it mean? What does he mean? Investigate. Not investigate? The last smile. What does it mean? Why did he look at me like that? Why did he smile? What does it mean? Questions, countless questions, crazily surged in David's mind. He still couldn't give a satisfactory answer. His trembling hand still stopped in front of the dagger. He didn't really pick it up. Until… What are you doing? A fair hand appeared in front of David and picked up the dagger. David raised his head and saw that it was Renas. David opened his mouth. Renas frowned at this time. She casually put the dagger on her belt, then leaned forward and helped David up with difficulty. What happened just now? Why did Sir Busby suddenly let you go? David's breath stopped for a moment. Renas. It seemed that she didn't see the scene where Busby fed him the vampire's blood. Maybe she still didn't know about this? I don't know. David shook his head and smiled bitterly. But at least I didn't die. No matter what, it's something to be happy about. And surviving is the most important thing. Renas agreed with this and then asked directly, How do you feel now? Can you still move? She didn't care about David that much, but now only David could take her to the paradise created by the Revolutionary Army for the descendants of the ancient race to live. She needed him. I can walk, but not fast, David said rather weakly. His ribs were almost all broken, but at this moment, after the blood in his body boiled, the pain gradually weakened. You check Meow's condition. I already checked when I came over. Your companion is still breathing. Renas hurriedly said, I'm not strong enough to carry her. Let me do it. David gritted his teeth. I still have some recovery potions with me. He didn't have any at all, but he could only use this excuse. Renas nodded without any doubt and took the initiative to run to Meow's side. Only then did David slowly breathe a sigh of relief. He found that he was getting more and more skilled at lying. Creak, yeah. At the door, the sound of the door axle grinding continued and was long and slow. Busby leaned against the door and raised his head to look into the room. Blood flowed out from the wound on his chest and soaked his boot. His bloody footprints were almost everywhere on the way here. Busby's eyes were dim, like a drowsy patient. His eyelids trembled as he tried to keep them open. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, only a sound similar to exhaling came out. In the room, the girl was sitting on the sofa. She rested her head on the corner of the sofa. Her jade-like hand was supporting her chin, and she just watched Busby come in. "Mina." Busby's voice suddenly became clearer. "Brother, you're back." The girl chuckled at this time and said softly, "Mina is hungry, brother." Between the girl's lips, two small sharp teeth were faintly discernible as the girl chuckled. Chapter 1408. In the room, Busby, as usual, pulled the girl into his arms, completely enveloping her. He talked to her. He did not want to remember what Meow Meow said about his identity. What he wanted to remember was that he was Busby, a child who walked out from the Lost Rift. He had been to the Lost Rift before, but it wasn't to hunt down the descendants of the ancients who had escaped and hid in the Lost Rift. It was because he used to live in the Lost Rift. He was one of those children who were born with mutations. He remembered that his father's name was Norman, and his mother's name was Beakies. The ancients in the crack found out why the newborns were mutated, so they killed all the children. But he did not die. He hid. He hid in a place where no one could find him. He silently observed all the people, including his parents who gave birth to him. He saw with his own eyes that his parents broke the rules and were expelled from the settlement. He would secretly get some food that his parents could find and put it not far away from them. Later on, her parents gave birth to a new child. He felt that he was overjoyed. He thought that he would never have his own kind again. He had his own kind. Sister. He had a sister, but his parents seemed to want to kill his sister too. Just like how they killed him and the other children like him. He took his sister away in anger. He left his parents with absolute fear. He took his sister and escaped from the crack. He began to hide near the farm. He named his sister Mina. Mina did not mutate. She was just an ordinary human. So he temporarily put Mina in the farm. He also met the person who gave him this identity and this power. Baligan. He became Baligan's confidant. How could it be possible? Mina died 10 years ago because she was overdosed by the named vampire. Those were all just nonsense. Mina. Wasn't Mina right here in his arms? Wasn't the extremely alluring smell of the blood of his loved ones surging and churning his blood-sucking instincts? Brother. Are you hungry? Mina is ready. She always understands me this way. Busby greedily took in the girl's body fragrance and the sweet fragrance of fresh blood. He slowly lowered his head and opened his mouth that had vampire fangs. He gently kissed the girl's snow-white shoulder. Blood began to slowly flow into his mouth, then down his throat, and slowly into his body. Vampires didn't have body temperature, they were a cold species. But the warmth of the blood made him so intoxicated that he could even hear Mina's low moans. It seemed to be painful, but it also seemed to carry some kind of joy. The room seemed to be so quiet. They hugged each other as if they couldn't tell each other apart. However, the mirror in the room wasn't so realistic. The reflection in the mirror was another scene. In the mirror, Busby's eyes seemed to have lost their focus as he knelt on the ground. As for the girl in front of him, she was hugging his neck. Her small mouth was on his neck, gently sucking on it. On the fair neck, the girl's throat even moved rhythmically. Busby's absent-minded face gradually showed a complicated expression, as if he was in bliss. The low moans were actually his. The bite marks had always been on his body, and there were many of them. It turned out that he had been providing her with blood all along. He was the one who was named. All along, but today the girl felt something different from usual. She quickly opened her eyes, and her lips moved away from Busby's neck. She reached out to wipe the blood on her lips, but at this moment she felt it was hard to swallow. The girl's slender fingers began to scratch the bite marks on Busby's body. These bite marks were her masterpiece and could never be erased. In fact, the taste of vampire's blood was more delicious than human blood. The girl had never felt strange about why she could drink vampire's blood. Just like how vampires could gain immortality and strength by drinking human blood. In that case, there must be some individuals who treat vampires as food for themselves. It turns out that you've woken up. The girl whispered, there's no way to feel the happiness of a brother from you. Mina. Busby slowly raised his head. He, who was kneeling on the ground, looked at the girl's face in a daze. What he could see was nothing but a blur. In fact, he couldn't see clearly. He couldn't see what this face looked like. Mina is here. The girl gently hugged Busby's head again. She's always here, brother. Always. Busby slowly closed his eyes, lowered his head, and completely buried himself in the girl's embrace. There will be a good dream that you'll never wake up from. The girl gently whispered the last words in his ear. When she let go of Busby's hands, he fell to the ground. In fact, there was a huge wound on Busby's chest. The tang knife that was stabbed in his back had been pushed out of his chest by him. The knife was thrown at the door at this time, and the blade was still dripping with blood. The girl picked up the tang knife and returned to Busby's side. She used the blade to draw on Busby's body, and then suddenly pierced the blade into Busby's body. She directly dug out his heart from his body and held it in her hands. The heart's blood completely soaked the girl's hands. His heart was still burning, and it would beat for a long, long time. The girl suddenly put the heart to her lips. She opened her mouth as if she was going to eat the heart like this. Her face was full of expectation. Isn't it a pity to eat it like this? Then, somewhere in the room, a voice suddenly sounded. The girl slowly raised her head and saw the noble master, who was playing the king's game with her in the villa. You're here. The girl was not afraid. Even if she was holding a beating heart with both hands, she still showed an innocent and beautiful smile. The noble master in the villa. Soon. We'll reach the high wall soon. Renas's voice sounded with a hint of urgency in David's ears. David just tightened his face, not knowing what he was thinking. He didn't pay too much attention to Renas's excitement at this time. His body had unknowingly recovered. The degree of recovery was even much better than using some of the secret medicines that the Revolutionary Army had painstakingly obtained. He was a little frightened of the changes in his body. David had been engaged in secret resistance activities all these years, so he knew too well that vampires had many means to control humans. The one called Busby didn't choose to kill him, but used such a method instead, which made David even more worried. If he was really transformed by Busby, then Busby would be his senior and could completely control his life and death. Compared to simply killing David, this was obviously more effective. David asked himself if he was in David's shoes, he probably wouldn't choose to kill David directly. Instead, he would convert David, and that would be equivalent to gaining a servant who couldn't betray him. David, who couldn't find the source of his hatred for vampires, wouldn't resist becoming a vampire. What he resisted was that even if he had power, he would still be controlled by others and become a vampire's slave. He longed for the power of freedom. While he was thinking, David suddenly felt a slight movement from Mayo on his back. Mayo seemed to have woken up. David, you're finally awake, that's great. He immediately put on an excited expression. What on earth? Mayo only felt a splitting headache. You had a big fight with the vampire, and in the end. David briefly explained what happened. Basically, he just omitted the part where he ate a drop of Busby's blood. Is that so? In the end, I still couldn't kill the traitor. Mayo couldn't help but smile bitterly. In order to accumulate power, she took the risk to kill many superior nobles, but the overly powerful black flame made it impossible for her to control, and in the end, she could only lose control. Looking at the destroyed state of the farm, Mayo couldn't help but have a complicated look in her eyes. Traitor! Renas, who was listening silently, couldn't help but ask curiously, You know Sir Busby? Mayo just frowned, and David seemed to have sensed Mayo's thoughts, so he directly said, She's called Renas, and she's currently our companion. Don't worry. Mayo just pondered for a moment, but didn't say anything. Now that she was seriously exhausted, she was so weak that she could only walk on David's back. But she answered Renas's question. That guy and I grew up in the farm at the same time. We became adults 10 years ago. What? Renas couldn't help but be shocked. I heard that Sir Busby has a very high authority in the clan. He really came from the farm, like us. Is he also a descendant of the ancients? Because his predecessor was the acting Grand Duke of the clan, Mayo said calmly. Mimi said calmly, I don't know why Busby was so willing in the end, but he was chosen by the acting Grand Duke of the clan, Bailegan, and turned into a vampire himself. So, even though it has only been less than 10 years, I think it's not strange for him to quickly gain power with the help of the acting Grand Duke. David listened silently, memorizing the information word by word. Then, you said he's a traitor. Renas wanted to say something, but stopped. Mayo said coldly, a guy who said he wanted to destroy all vampires, but in the end, he was willing to become a vampire himself, and in turn, he slaughtered us. If he's not a traitor, then what is he? Renas could feel the hatred in Mayo's tone, so she immediately stopped asking and lowered her head. David also didn't say anything. He could clearly feel Mayo's hatred. But now, if his matter was exposed, then should he, at this place, give her? David's eyes suddenly became gloomy and cold. But the night hid his eyes well. Under the increasingly fierce eyes, David's eyes even turned slightly red. Bang! A loud sound suddenly came from the high wall not far ahead. The three of them subconsciously looked up, only to see a part of the high stone wall suddenly collapsed, and at the same time, a group of vampires wearing the uniform of the inspectorate was fleeing from the high wall in panic. David was shocked, and subconsciously focused his eyes. Not only his body's recovery ability was suddenly enhanced, but even his eyesight in the dark had also improved a lot. When David peeked through the high wall, he couldn't help but be stunned. What did he see? He saw Anne, the cunning and insidious woman who sneaked up on him from behind. At this moment, she was actually standing in the middle of the high wall, surrounded by people. Like a goddess, in the end, what happened to this shameless woman? Before he could think about it, he saw those low-level vampires of the inspectorate who were fleeing in panic were actually shot down by the humans in the high wall with something. Mayo frowned, and then her eyes flashed. She drew out the black flame in her body and burned it on one of the fallen vampires. The black flame that was nourished by the life of the vampires suddenly grew a little stronger. David, put me down, I feel better, she suddenly said to David softly. David didn't hear a trace of gentleness in her words. He only felt cold sweat all over his body. She noticed it? David tried his best not to show any disharmony, and slowly put Mayo down. Mayo, who was down, immediately began to drive the black flame to kill those low-level vampires of the inspectorate who were shot down. He secretly breathed a sigh of relief. But at this moment, he had to temporarily suppress a certain thought in his mind, because he didn't know if he would be seen if he did it now. At this moment, a female voice suddenly sounded in the entire farm town. It seemed to be transmitted through a certain channel. All humans and vampires in the farm, listen up. Amanda, the warrior who is favored by Goddess and is now officially announcing. This place has been conquered by us. And Goddessin? Not only David, but even Mayo and Renas were dumbfounded at this moment. They looked at the high wall, and at the speech of a woman who was emitting a dazzling light. We will liberate this place. Listen, as long as you believe in Goddessin, you will be saved. So shameful. Anne, who was surrounded by people, only wanted to find a hole to bury herself in at this moment. Chapter 1409. What happened outside the farm seemed to have nothing to do with this place. Only the blood slowly flowed out from the heart in the girl's hand. Its heartbeat seemed to be slowing down as if it would stop at any time. You're here, Mr. Noble of the villa. The girl didn't seem to have the intention to put down the heart. She still had the usual pure smile on her face and asked obediently, Are you here to name Mina? Boss Luo, who had shown up naturally, didn't intend to hide himself. He casually glanced at Busby, who fell on the ground. Perhaps, he who had lost his heart was not even a corpse at this time. The source of all vampires was their heart. Busby was actually in the girl's hand. Mr. Noble? The girl showed a curious look at this time. She didn't care about her appearance at this time. She still didn't intend to put down the heart in her hand. Luochu said slowly, "If Busby is dead, will he continue to use the name Mina?" "Mr. Noble, what are you talking about?" The girl chuckled at this time. "I'm Mina." Boss Luo just smiled slightly, but didn't say anything. The smile on the girl's face faded gradually. Or her appearance as Mina faded gradually. It was a gradual change of face. The girl's lips began to move to both sides of her cheeks. Her eyes were curved like two real crescent moons. Even, she didn't have a nose. This wasn't a normal human face. It didn't look like a human's face. Finally, her skin turned gray. In fact, it was scary. Holding the bloody heart in her hand, the girl with a little blood stain on her dress changed her face in this dim room. "What kind of character setting does Mr. Noble like?" The girl. She giggled at this time. "I can change into whatever you like, and it will be the best character setting. Anything is fine." Luochu thought for a while and said, "I remember when you played the King's game. You once said that your favorite was your brother. Second, third, and even everything would be your brother." The girl's horrifying face, the cracked smile suddenly disappeared. Luochu asked curiously, "I thought you wouldn't accept another a persona." She regained her smile as soon as she looked good, and even her face began to change continuously. Different young girls' faces appeared on her face as if she was looking at flowers on horseback. Every one of them had exquisite features, each with their own merit. During this rapid transformation, Boss Luo even saw the appearance of the little butterfly demon. He saw that Long Shiro was a little younger. His face was very close to that of Shinryu's when he was a child. And Yu Ye's blue eyes. Facing the girl's amazing performance, Boss Luo smiled and said, "They have all been eaten by you. Just like him." He was referring to Busby, the girl knew. In the end, her face stopped changing, and she returned to her original appearance as Mina. She said in a troubled tone, "It seems that there are so many, but none of them are liked by the nobles. This is difficult." "Isn't my original appearance good?" the girl said in distress. "No one will like my original appearance, no matter if it's human or the nobles, or even them." Boss Luo began to walk around the room. Under the girl's gaze, he came to the table. Luochu picked up a scroll of animal skin handbook on the table, glanced at it casually, and read a few sentences casually. "I can't find any food, and I don't have the strength to find food. I think I will die here with Beakies. They are Norman and Beakies." The girl smiled sweetly. "The nobles are so smart. They are my parents, and I am the second strange child born. I thought I was born with that appearance, so my parents despised me immediately." Luochu said, "I have read the diary. I remember Norman once wrote that as a mother, Beakies was even willing to use herself to feed the second child. So, will they still despise me?" "Yes." The girl's smile was still pure and beautiful. So pure and beautiful that it was scary. She said softly, "Only because the mother saw the cute child's face from the beginning. Do you hate them?" He rolled up the diary slowly and then put it on the table. If what the girl said was true, then even if this diary was written by Norman himself, there were still some unreal parts in it. From where it started, it was already fake. "Of course not," the young girl said excitedly. "How could that be? If there was no father and mother, I wouldn't be born." She held the vampire's heart in her hand, and like a happy bird, she began to spin her body and laughed. "I won't have the chance to taste so many delicious things. The taste of human blood is very good. So is the blood of vampires. And I can eat all the things that make them happy. So I have always been very happy." Boss Luo was silent for a moment and suddenly said, I have seen your brother. The child, Norman and Beaky's, gave birth to before you. The girl who was happily spinning her body as if dancing suddenly stopped, blinked her eyes, and said with slight surprise, So I really have a brother, Luochu said. I have read the first diary to everyone at the beginning, and it was mentioned there. The girl shook her head and said pitifully, I forgot. Luochu smiled and said, Actually, it is because of this that you became Mina. Probably the other ones that you ate were also sisters. The girl's, Mina, face faded again, and she changed back to her original ugly appearance. She said in a low voice, So, the noble master still doesn't intend to name me? Boss Luo shook his head and said, But you don't need me for the time being. The girl raised the heart in her hand a little higher and changed back to Mina's appearance again. She seemed to be unstable. At this time, she said in a more pitiful tone, But you see, this brother is going to break soon. I will be hungry. Boss Luo said, Actually, he is grateful to you from the bottom of his heart. In my opinion, you don't have to give up Busby now. The girl smiled and said, Really, the noble master. Brother Busby's blood has changed the taste. He has already discovered it, so he can't eat it anymore. Luochu said casually, Is that really the case? Isn't this natural? The girl tilted her head and said, Brother Busby already knows the truth. Since he knows that I am not the real Mina, then he definitely doesn't like me. Maybe, Luochu said softly, compared to the real Mina, he will even love you more. The girl opened her mouth slightly. Luochu said, Because after he lost, he found his sister again. So he will return here in the end, to your side, and is willing to fall into that fictitious relationship again. Liar. The girl suddenly puffed up her cheeks. The taste has obviously become so strange. It's different from what I've eaten before. It must have gone bad. Why did you drink it? Luochu asked softly. The girl was startled and didn't seem to react. Boss Luo said, If we eat something unpleasant or spoiled or moldy, we will vomit it immediately. So, why did you drink so much just now? The girl was a little absent-minded. She suddenly smiled and said, Because I was hungry and didn't want to waste it. Besides, I couldn't find another brother immediately at that time. Isn't it because it's the first time you tasted this taste? Luochu said slowly, When we first came to this world, we didn't even know whether the taste was good or bad. We just habitually define the things we often eat as delicious. Our taste buds have been guided since birth, so sometimes we can't tell whether the taste is good or bad for unfamiliar taste. Maybe it's just like you now. The girl suddenly became vigilant and narrowed her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. Then, Luochu suddenly said, I'll come again after you think it through. By the way, someone is waiting for you. It seems that he saw Busby on the way, so he followed you here. The girl was startled, but the aristocrat in front of her had disappeared. Her attention was all on this aristocrat, and she had no time to care about other things. She abruptly turned around and saw that there was indeed someone standing there in a daze at the entrance. Duoni? The girl called out her name in surprise. Facing Duoni, who appeared at the entrance, a trace of panic flashed across the girl's face. But she soon recovered and said with a smile, Duoni, what are you doing here? It's so late, if you don't sleep, you'll be scolded by the housemaster. She didn't put down the heart in her hand. But Duoni didn't care about it. She just walked into the room slowly. When she walked on the carpet, she left light red footprints. She came barefoot and stepped on a lot of stones on the way, so the soles of her feet were already cut. Duoni, what's wrong? The girl took a step forward. Duoni looked at her in a daze, her lips moved slightly. Mina. Daddy Ricky, he's dead. I saw him die. Mina, I'm so tired, so tired. I feel like I can't breathe. Don't be afraid, Duoni. The girl said softly, Your father is not dead, he's still alive. Look, who am I? The girl's face began to change. But at this time, Duoni suddenly held her head and screamed. She screamed hysterically. Suddenly, under the girl's astonishment, Duoni quickly picked up the tang knife on the ground and stabbed forward with both hands. The knife stabbed into the girl's body. It went through her body. Duoni? I saw it. I saw you. He killed my father. It's you, it's all your fault. It's all your fault. Give my father back to me. She used all her strength to push the handle of the knife and stabbed it deeper into the girl's body. She even pushed the girl's body until she hit the wall. It's not true, it's not true. It's all a lie. It's all a lie. She continued to speak crazily as she stared at the girl's, Mina, face. You're not Mina. You're not Mina. The girl spat out a mouthful of blood. She didn't know how the knife stabbed into her body could cause such a wound. She even heard some other sound. It wasn't the sound that should come from this room, but from outside. The sound echoed in the entire farm. She listened carefully. The so-called nobles just treat you as food. The so-called dangerous outside world and need to be protected are all lies. This farm is just a place that vampires set up to suck our blood. Look at these people. They were all taken away from the farm when they were adults. Look at these faces. Are there any familiar faces? Who remembers me? I used to live in the 3rd dorm. I'm only 20 years old this year. My name is Amanda. Who remembers me? What do you think is behind this high wall? It's hell. It's a slaughterhouse. It's the source of all pain. I'm Amanda. I'm the most loyal follower of Goddessin. Repeating over and over again, the woman called Amanda kept repeating the same words to the entire farm. The girl's gaze returned from outside the window. She lowered her head and looked at Duo and I, who was still holding onto the hilt of the knife. She suddenly understood. So, it's like this. The stirring of the blade caused the girl's internal organs to be damaged once again. Then, she once again vomited out a large pool of dark red blood. Her face gradually faded, and bit by bit, it returned to the original face that didn't resemble anyone. It's already broken down. I don't want to know this. I only want my father. Give him back to me, give him back to me. Give him back to me. She screamed and pulled out the tang knife again. It's fake. She stabbed the knife again. Liar. It's all fake. Liar. She pulled out the knife. It's all fake. It's all fake. I don't believe it. She slashed wildly. Give my father back to me. Give him back to me. Give Mina back to me. Die, 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 die. She slashed wildly. Ah! Duoni screamed at this time, her hands trembled, and the tang knife fell to the ground. She covered her face and screamed in horror, and then ran out of the door in fear. Finally, the young girl whose body was covered with knife wounds slowly slid down the wall. The heart she was holding also left her palm, and rolled out of her palm, rolling to the side, the distance of a fingertip. But she didn't seem to have the strength to close the distance between them. Chapter 14:10. They were eating a kind of biscuit made by grinding blue algae into powder. None of them spoke, making the cave seem so quiet. They were Norman and Beakies, an exiled man and woman. She's a monster, the man suddenly said, just like her brother, maybe even scarier. Monster? Who is it? I can't remember what he looks like. The woman lowered her head and said softly, as if she was blaming and resentful, I didn't even see him once, and you guys took him away. Took him away. Then killed him. She suddenly became agitated, and her voice sounded like thunder in the narrow cave. Lower your voice, do you want to wake her? This monster, the man said anxiously. He even stepped forward and covered the woman's mouth with his hand, staring into her eyes. Monster. Who is it? It's her. With a hint of horror, the woman subconsciously looked to the side. It was made of hay, some bark and algae like a small bed in Nestle. Monster. Who is it? On the small bed, a pair of eyes under the animal's skin, curved like a crescent moon, unlike a human's eyes, were looking at them in the cave. "What do you want to do?" "Norman! Norman!" The woman suddenly became terrified. The man suddenly got up, with a cold face, and walked in front of her. He raised a bone axe made of bones in his hand. She knew what the man wanted to do and screamed, "You're crazy! We'll die!" The man said in a low voice, "She's a monster." As soon as he said that, the man gritted his teeth and reached out to take her out from under the animal skin quilt, lifting her up. "Look carefully, this is it. This is a monster." She had gray skin, a cracked mouth, and teeth that were clearly visible like sawteeth, eyes that curved like a crescent moon, and a nose that didn't even have a human's. "Monster. It's me. Do you see it clearly?" The man's voice grew louder as he raised her up high. At the same time, his arm was trembling. He was afraid of something that even he didn't know. Finally, the man raised the bone axe in his hand again. "No!" The woman's voice was filled with grief, fear, and even anxiety. She hugged her man and shook her head violently. "It's not like that, Norman. Look carefully. Please take a good look. Look at this child. She's not a monster. Look. He's crazy." The man's heart was filled with grief. He thought that the woman could no longer think normally. But he loved her after all. Otherwise, he wouldn't be willing to leave the place he lived to accompany her. He could only force himself to raise his head and take one last look, as a final apology for the name he was unable to bear. Father. He would only take one last look at her, and after that he would forget about her. He slowly raised his head and looked at the person whom he was holding by the back of the neck. This is our. He was shocked by the scene before him. In an instant it was as if all the real and fake things were mixed together. Our child. He threw away the bone axe in his hand and hugged she in his arms. He looked at the woman excitedly. "Look, Beakies. This is our child. She is not a monster. She is normal. Ha ha ha. Normal." The woman cried tears of joy. They hugged each other. In their arms, she slowly cracked her mouth full of saw-like teeth. It was like a smile. So, it was possible to make others like you. When the girl regained her consciousness, she didn't see Duoni anymore. But the weapon that had cut her countless times was thrown on the ground. The girl was a bit hesitant about why she could wake up. She suddenly felt strange all over her body. She raised her head and saw a scene that she couldn't understand until now. A heart that didn't beat anymore was hanging upside down above her head. From the blood vessels in the atrium of the heart, there were dark red muscle fibers that looked like blood vessels. These fibers seemed to weave a spider web, and Busby's heart was in the center of the spider web. Then, more muscle fibers grew out from another atrium and spread to the girl's body. She felt very comfortable. It covered all the wounds on her body that were cut by the tang knife. Many flagella grew out of the muscle fibers that stuck to the wounds and penetrated into her body little by little. The blood that splashed out when she was cut could no longer be seen on the ground. The blood that flowed out was absorbed and sent back to the girl's body. The vampire's ability to control blood. But it wasn't the girl's ability, it was the last bit of strength of the heart that was about to stop beating. Not only did it collect the girl's lost blood, but it also transferred the last essence of the heart into the girl's body. It didn't beat anymore. It was like an ordinary person's heart that was out of refrigeration and turned dark red. It wasn't fresh anymore and even slightly smelled. Perhaps it had started to rot inside. But it was squeezing out the last drop of blood from the heart. It was like a drop of water on a stalactite, a drop at the bottom of the atrium, expanding little by little. The girl watched this scene quietly. She didn't have an ordinary face, so even if she knew what expression she should make to express her feelings, she couldn't do it in the end. Maybe she could, but she needed to use someone else's appearance. She couldn't use her original appearance because she was a monster. Not only would she suck human blood, but she would also suck the blood of vampires and nibble away other people's happiness at the same time. When the last drop of blood was squeezed out of the atrium and dripped down, the girl subconsciously stretched out the tip of her tongue and instinctively accepted it. The last drop of blood fell on the tip of the girl's tongue, and the heart was completely rotten. The muscle fibers that stuck to the wall also peeled off. With the loss of the last bit of blood essence, the heart would die completely, and there would be nothing left of Baesby. It couldn't even be reborn with the help of the clan's blood pool. He was truly dead now. The girl stretched out her hands and caught the falling heart, but it suddenly turned into a pus-like substance in her palm and finally fell from her fingers. She finally swallowed the last drop of blood in her mouth without saying a word. It seemed like a long time had passed. The girl slowly stood up and walked out of the room silently. From here on, she didn't use anyone's appearance. She used her original appearance when she came to this world and walked into this world again. The streets were deserted and there were traces of destruction everywhere. Vaguely, there seemed to be some sounds of fighting. That was the beginning of the humans' rebellion against the vampires. The descendants of the ancients who came out from the other side of the high wall were now chasing the remaining vampires. Whether it was the low-level vampires of the inspection team or the elites of the patrol team, they were all retreating at this time. They lost the support of the superior nobles. The superior nobles had already died under the flames of Meow's revenge. Even Sir Busby, who temporarily held the power of the clan, had disappeared at this moment. They were like headless flies without any effective command. The ancients opposite them had more and more terrifying weapons in their hands. A variety of powerful weapons emerged one after another. And Meow. This woman was like the Grim Reaper, constantly harvesting their lives in the dark night. Some of the naturalized humans who were originally working in the Wu farm had the idea of defecting under the woman named Amanda's speech. They were actually this kind of reality because they had tried their best to become adults and experienced the impact of the truth. Most of them had the same idea as Renas. But the children, crops, were different. They hadn't experienced this, and they didn't know what was the difference between offering and a food. They didn't know what mating farm was for, but they knew the meaning of a slaughterhouse. However, they didn't know that the slaughterhouse was actually one of them, a few of them or maybe all of them in a certain batch. The crops began to wander on the dilapidated street in a daze. They cried, laughed, or walked away absent-mindedly, but they didn't know where they were going. The girl who walked on the street in her original appearance, at this time, silently walked past these children. None of the children noticed her existence, and she didn't stop for a moment because of the child. The sound of fighting gradually weakened. The number of vampires who represented the Tordo clan that could still resist was getting smaller and smaller. It was conceivable that vampires were a species that was extremely difficult to produce. Their numbers weren't high to begin with. But humans were different. There were many humans who were liberated from the mating farm. And there were even more humans who were liberated from the slaughterhouse. In this war, humans had an absolute advantage in numbers, and they had magical weapons that could fight against vampires. But who cares about these things? The girl thought silently in her heart. Xia was still walking forward as if she was looking for something. She felt that she was about to find it, but something was missing. Not long after, the girl saw Duoni again, and she paused slightly. But Duoni didn't seem to know, and didn't remember, She just ran happily on the street. As usual, she would greet everyone in the farm or the town. But now, she was dirty. Her favorite nightgown was covered in dust and blood, and her hair was messy. But her laughter seemed to be contagious. It seemed to be the only sound that those children who had lost their minds could hear. So, they began to follow Duoni, and gradually, there were more of them. Duoni's laughter was like a shepherd playing a flute in a myth, and they began to form a group behind Duoni. They all laughed and wandered around the dilapidated streets, talking about some of the things they usually talked about, as if nothing had happened and everything was as usual. Shia watched them leave with Duoni and gradually disappear into the street. She suddenly felt that this would be the last time she would see these children. Now that they had disappeared, they had really disappeared. They had disappeared into something that was more real than reality. Finally, the last figure could no longer be seen. This time, she didn't step forward but slowly turned around. The girl saw Luocio, who disappeared not long ago. He seemed to be waiting for Shia's arrival. Or rather, she took the initiative to find him this time. This time, the girl didn't call Boss Luo as a noble master. She even became very quiet, without a trace of naughtiness and naivety of Mina. Maybe it was because she had returned to her original appearance. This smell, what is it called? She raised her head. Her eyes, which were completely bent down, seemed to have no eyeballs, just two curved lines. Boss Luo walked to Shia's side. He glanced at the thing in the girl's hands. It was a pile of residue that couldn't even be called rotten meat. He said slowly, when the superior nobles use character settings to feed crops, what do you think they need when they suck crops' blood? The taste of happiness. Shia almost didn't think about it, because Shia knew this too well. Because ever since she was born, she had all kinds of strange abilities. She was like a human, and she had human things, but she was also like a vampire, and she also had vampire things. She was a monster. Boss Luo shook his head. I think it should be called the taste of reality. She immediately refuted, but this is all fake, everything is just a fiction. Fake things can be more real than real things. Luocio said softly. Just like them. Duoni? Shia thought, looking at the end of the street where the children and Duoni disappeared. She couldn't see anything anymore. Boss Luo nodded. For Busby, even if you are not the real Mina, it doesn't matter. To him, you're no different from the real Mina. To him, you're already real. So, it's not that the taste has changed, but this is the taste it should have. Not through substitution, or even theft, but the taste that exists for you. It's delicious. Shia looked up, her sawtooth-like teeth opened slightly, and made an extremely unpleasant sound. Luocio asked softly, Name? She shook her head, No, never. Then let's call you Mina. Luocio suddenly said. Shia was silent for a moment. She slowly picked up the heart residue in her hands, put it to her lips, and chewed little by little. It's the taste of reality, then she. Mina laughed and shed tears. Chapter 14:11. There will be such a day. Actually, she had never thought that such a day would come. Even though she had the habit of fantasizing, she had never imagined that such a day would come. We counterattacked the nobles and even beat them, who were once high and mighty, to the ground. Looking at the nobles who were escorted to her, kneeling and begging for mercy, whom she could only obey in the past, and quietly pinched her well-hidden belly. I seem to have eaten a little too much recently. How should I deal with these nobles, these vampires? Based on what she did before, once she said something like killing the vampires with a cold expression, the people around her would cheer and the brightness of the gems on her ring would increase. She gradually began to understand how to make the gems on her ring light up faster. However, she felt that there was something wrong with this method. There were many things that she couldn't understand. Now, she could only slowly discover and do it. Goddess, we found a few suspicious people in front. Lord Avatar wants to invite you over. Lord Avatar? This child is so fast. She complained in her heart. Then, she nodded at the person and said calmly, Lead the way. Under the guidance of the crowd, and quickly arrived at the place where the incident happened. She saw that there was a man and two women in the circle. At this time, when the crowd saw that the goddess had arrived, they made way for her. What happened? And asked in a low voice. Amanda walked up to her and knelt down before she said anything. Then, she said respectfully, Goddess, we found a few good guys. One of them said that he knows you. And was stunned, but she wasn't too surprised after that. How? She was originally a dormitory supervisor in the farm, and often walked around the farm. It was impossible that no one knew her, but she couldn't help but be curious. Who could it be? Thus, under Avatar's protection, and walked through the crowd step by step and finally arrived in front of the three surrounded humans. "It's you," when she saw the other party, and was stunned at first and then opened her mouth. Who did she see? She was surprised to see David here, the guy she had hit with a black stick. This is so awkward. I also didn't expect that I would meet you here. In the crowd, David looked at Anne with a complicated expression. Many thoughts flashed through his mind. In fact, he had started to have these thoughts when he saw her on the high wall, and didn't care about David's answer, but the people around her didn't think so. This was especially the case for Amanda, who immediately glared at David with an unfriendly gaze. This made David feel extremely uneasy, and a chill run down his back. The people here were looking at him as if they were looking at their greatest enemy. Meow suddenly came to David's side. Perhaps it was because she had killed a lot of vampires, or perhaps it was because of some other reason, but her body naturally emitted a kind of frightening aura. Especially the bunch of black flames stuck to her cheeks. It was really too strange. Was it really Anne? I'm Renas. Linus of the Inspectorate. Do you still remember me? However, Renas didn't care at this time. She was a little emotional and quickly walked toward, and without saying anything. However, she didn't expect that before she could take a few steps, she was already blocked by the people around her. Renas was pressed to the ground by two men with sticks. Then, another two men directly grabbed her hands, causing Renas to become frightened. Let her go. And saw this and could only shout at the rather fanatical protectors around her. She had a feeling that this group of goddess guards, which she didn't even know when they were formed, had been led astray by Amanda. The protectors loyally carried out Goddess Anne's order and directly released Renas. And then continued, I do know these people. I have something to discuss with them alone. You all should disperse first. Other than Amanda, the other protectors didn't object. As for Amanda, she only hesitated for a moment before dispersing as well. However, she later told everyone not to go too far away. Everyone was still watching closely. After standing in silence for a while, and took the initiative to speak, So, this is the companion you said must be saved. But it seems like she doesn't need it. And was obviously talking about Meow. Anyone who saw Meow right now wouldn't think that she was a weak girl who needed someone to save her. Meow just moved closer to David and whispered, David, who is she? David said seriously, I met her in the 7th dormitory. She claimed to be a naturalized human, a dormitory warden backup. At that time, she was being interrogated by a few inspectorate humans. I saved her and at the same time, I hoped that she could help me find you all in the farm. After that, some unpleasant things happened. As for why she is now... David stopped here and looked around. His meaning was quite clear. Meow nodded. In fact, she didn't have much dislike for this group of people, from Anne to everyone around her. On the contrary, she was more curious about them. This was also the first time she saw a human face vampires. And they even won an overwhelming victory. This was really inconceivable. She hated vampires, so she was very supportive of those who were enemies of vampires. You can say that I've encountered a lot of things. And smiled awkwardly and quickly said, David, let's just pretend that the unpleasant things didn't happen. After all, I just wanted to protect myself. As for now. And looked around and coughed lightly. You still haven't found your companions? I think I can help you now. You see. How should I put it? At least this place seems to have been taken down by me. That was a very flirtatious sentence. David's gaze was very complicated. He even thought that and must have gotten something from the merchant, which led to her current situation. What did she get from the merchant? Meow. What did she get from the merchant? Why am I the only one? David shook his head slightly. Thank you for thinking of helping me, but I don't need it anymore. The companions I'm looking for, except for Meow, have all been sacrificed. However, I wonder if you have seen my other companions? They are together. They were planning to sneak into the mating farm, and said directly, "The group you're talking about, I know where they are." Really? David opened his mouth in surprise, and gently twirled her hair with her fingers and nodded. We met a group of people on the way. They were hiding in the manure pit. My men found them and saved them. I'll get someone to bring them here. Just came here. David's pupils shrank slightly, and then he was overjoyed. Thank you so much, Anne. And was not used to this guy suddenly being so polite. But thinking that this guy was willing to take the risk and stay in the farm to look for his companions, she thought that he had a good character. How about this? Seeing that you're tired, I'll get someone to take you to rest. At this time, and waved her hand and signaled for Amanda, who was not far away, to come over. It's also good for you to meet up with your companions. Now, the farm is basically suppressed, but I can't say for sure if there are any remnants of Torito hiding somewhere, so you guys better be careful. We will, David said seriously. After that, under Anne's order, Amanda quickly called a few people to take David and the other two away. Goddess! After David and the others were taken away, Amanda suddenly walked up to Anne and said, "This man has a vampire-like smell on him," and blinked her eyes and thought for a moment before saying, "It should be from the battle with the vampires, right? Didn't everyone have a lot of vampires' blood on them too?" "Be careful," Amanda said seriously, and thought for a while and said, "You've seen the people from the Revolutionary Army that we saved, right? This David is the person in charge of this operation, and he even volunteered to stay and save his companions. Logically speaking, there should be no problem with his character. Although this guy's methods are a bit tough. After all, it was David who saved her from those men from the inspection team. Great goddess!" Amanda took a step forward, her eyes shining brightly. And who couldn't bear Amanda's gaze looked away and then said, "Well, if you're worried, you can pay more attention. There's no harm anyway." She didn't know if it was because she was tired or something else, but she felt that David seemed a bit different after seeing him again. But then she remembered that David used his memories before he became an adult to exchange for the weapon. Perhaps it would change David more or less. Today's events were enough, and Anne didn't want to spend too much time thinking about David. Compared to the fact that she was the goddess of so many rescued descendants of the ancients, David's matter was too insignificant. "Oh, right." At this moment, and suddenly called out to Amanda, "I have something to do. Can you help me with it?" "My honor." Amanda's emotions were instantly lifted, and was already used to this and said casually, "Go to the monastery and hide something under the floor of the confession room. After you take it out, just light it up. Just light it up." Without asking why, Amanda went to carry out the task without saying anything. Seeing Amanda leave quickly, and couldn't help but yawn. She was really tired today, and now she just wanted to find a place to rest. "I wonder if that guy will be scared to death when he comes over." And patted her shoulder and walked to the resting room prepared for the believers. She mocked herself, "I'm the goddess. Search this place. Once you find the remaining vampires, kill them immediately." The humans who were saved from the slaughterhouse hated vampires much more than the humans in the mating farm. Their worship of the goddess was also more fanatical. At the same time, they were also the ones who rushed to the forefront in the battle. "The goddess is resting. We must completely clean up this place before she wakes up. We must not let the dirty vampires tarnish the place where the goddess stands." That's right. Today is the day of victory. This is the place where we liberate. This is the Holy Land where we are reborn. We must not allow any filth to exist. They were so pure, either black or white. In this group of goddesses that had just formed, there was no doubt about it. "Captain, we found something in this house." A temporary troop armed to the teeth violently barged into the house. This was supposed to be a candy house. They found a pair of siblings hiding here with a trace of fear. They were humans, children who hadn't reached adulthood in the farm. Since they weren't vampires, the temporary troop was naturally more amiable. They were even gentle. They wanted to convey the greatness of the goddess and to the siblings and save them from the abyss of pain. "It's okay now. From now on, you are free. You can even continue your previous life, because we will protect you." They were even blindly confident. The brother and sister hugged each other and curled up. Facing the person in front of them, they silently nodded their heads, but their gazes were even more vacant. They were different from those crops that had collapsed, and they were also different from those children that had completely gone crazy. He could only be sure that they were indeed humans. "What are your names?" Everyone looked at the young man who was the elder brother. There were large areas of burns on his face, and his original appearance couldn't be recognized. Norman. The elder brother said his name nervously. "My name is Busby. I'm in the number 9 dormitory. I'll be an adult in 1 month. Norman, right?" "Got it." The leader of the believers nodded and immediately looked at his sister, saying softly, "What about you, child?" "Mina." The girl nestled in her brother's arms, looking at the world and the adults who showed kindness to her, and said her name softly. In the villa, Boss Luo carried the servant girl, who couldn't move in the balcony, and walked back to the room. Then he untied her clothes and began to carefully deal with her damaged parts. Soon, she became perfect again. Boss Luo didn't ask why the servant girl did it. He just sat behind her and began to comb her hair with a comb. She enjoyed the tranquility at this moment. "What's that?" she asked. She looked at the thing that her master put on the bedside table before tidying up her body. It was a blood-red gem-like thing. The power of the second child. Boss Luo smiled. She chose to be an ordinary person. An ordinary person? The servant girl tilted her head. Yes. Luochu kissed her forehead and chuckled. A simple ordinary person who will be born, grow old, get sick and die, and have a family to accompany her. It's easy for her to obtain happiness. Really? Boss Luo said softly. It's no longer necessary. Just like what a certain acting Grand Duke once said, if the fake is real enough, there is no need to distinguish between the real and the fake. The sky was bright. Chapter 14:12. When it was close to dawn, a green smoke rose up from somewhere in the farm. It seemed to be some kind of signal. On the hillside in the distance, a piece of the lawn was suddenly lifted. A figure quickly stood up and left in a hurry. The person whispered in disbelief. "How could this happen? We must inform the leader as soon as possible." He disappeared in the direction of the night. Then the sun shone on this place. At dawn. It was very difficult to recover in this place. Kelowna's Shinryu stayed outside for a long time to recover some strength. She was barely able to cope with most of the problems, so she chose to return. As for what happened in the farm, since it had already come to this, the true dragon of China naturally did not choose to continue fooling around. In fact, she had learned to restrain herself a lot. After the experience of the Longer, Kelowna's Shinryu knew that she wasn't really invincible in the world. Maybe she was before, but obviously not now. Of course, she was obviously unhappy, but this Kelowna's Shinryu didn't have the habit of keeping a straight face. So when she returned to the villa, she opened the door rudely with a pair of dead fish eyes. The followers of Goddess and were still wandering around the town. They hadn't expanded their range of activities to the villa yet, but it wouldn't take long for them to do so. "You're back." What surprised Long Shiruo and Luo Dance was that when they returned to the villa, they saw Boss Luo wearing an apron and holding a plate of fried eggs. "Breakfast is ready, come and eat." Boss Luo smiled at this time. "Miss Dance, I've prepared the food for you." So the little butterfly gently bit her finger and glanced back and forth between Kelowna's Shinryu. Then she lowered her head and walked quickly away from Kelowna's Shinryu. She could only sigh in her heart. Long Shirua stared at Boss Luo with an unhappy look. But why did she seem to have seen this scene before? When she just returned home, she wore an apron and cooked breakfast. She had imagined this scene before. The true dragon of the divine land was stunned. It seemed to be unable to move as it stood at the entrance in a daze. Miss Long, Miss Long? Shirua. Kelowna's Shinryu murmured. Boss Luo blinked. Yes? Nothing. Kelowna's Shinryu was like a soldier being inspected in the square, striding quickly into the house. Luocha was amused, holding a plate of fried eggs, and walked into the living room. The little butterfly was sitting at the dining table obediently. Long Shirua sat there and looked at the ceiling, thinking about something. Suddenly, there was a yawn. A figure got up from the sofa and started to scratch her messy hair. It was Miss Witch. Aha! It's already dawn. Maria rubbed her sleepy eyes, but she suddenly remembered something. She quickly reached out and touched her head. She found that the leather bag was still there, and she let out a long sigh of relief. Good morning, Miss Maria. Boss Luo greeted her naturally. Come and have breakfast. Maria nodded, then her shoulders drooped. Last night, I fell asleep while sitting. I really can't oversleep on this sofa. My waist. Speaking of which, where did you pick this up from? Kelowna's Shinryu squinted at her. How could you sleep like a pig after such a big commotion last night? But it was just a voice transmission, not a real voice. It was just that she didn't care about the ways of the world, not that she didn't understand the ways of the world. Definitely not to give face to the profiteer. Well, of course, it was like that. Boss Luo responded casually. Compared to this, Miss Long, when do you plan to pay the first fee for the information? You should have given me a reminder. Kelowna's Shinryu's eyes widened, then she gasped. She felt that she was really blind to talk to this profiteer last night. Here. I'll give you as much as you want. Take it, take it. Profiteer. Is one tube enough? Is it not enough for 2 tubes? She said aloud, scaring Miss Witch, who was about to eat the fried egg. She bit her tongue, but she didn't dare to shout, so she could only worry. Looking at Kelowna's Shinryu, who pinched up her sleeves and stretched out her fair arms, looking like she was saying, "Come and get it yourself if you dare." Boss Luo didn't know why he laughed out loud. It was a very relaxed and natural laugh. He said, "Wait until we go back, it's not safe for you here, it's better to preserve your strength. Also, next time, don't ask strange questions." Kelowna's Shinryu's ears reddened, but she still rolled her eyes, looking like an experienced driver, and even glanced at Boss Luo's certain part. The atmosphere was quite good, at least in Miss Witch's opinion. But, did I miss anything? Outside the living room, Miss Maid walked in slowly with a basket. In the basket were some staples such as bread. She came to the table, put down the food, and smiled. Miss Long, good morning. Did you have a good rest last night? It seemed like a normal greeting, and there was nothing wrong with it, Maria thought. But why did it feel like the atmosphere had suddenly frozen? Kelowna's Shinryu squinted her eyes, revealing a big smile. I had a good sleep, thank you for your concern. It's lucky that no strange guy went crazy in the second half of the night. That's good. Miss Maid nodded slightly, and immediately returned to Boss Luo's side, helping him to take off the apron. Shinryu's legs were shaking, and it was getting more and more violent. The power of Shinryu that recovered a little even leaked out, making the whole villa shake, and the dust on the ceiling fell down. What happened? Earthquake? Changes in the region? Maria suddenly panicked, and habitually reached for her collar. But the little butterfly monster blinked her eyes, patting on Kelowna's thigh to stop the shaking. Only the little butterfly monster was focused on eating breakfast, not thinking too much, and was as steady as an old dog. It's stuffy here, I'll go out to get some fresh air. Long Shirua suddenly stood up, holding the little butterfly monster's hand, and said expressionlessly, a whiff of coquettish perfume, suffocating. Bang! The door of the living room was slammed shut. Miss Witch, who was sitting carefully, lowered her head and didn't say anything. She only felt that the little brother of the healing magician was not as effective as the central air conditioner this time. "Miss Maria, do you like the breakfast? It's delicious." But it was still very healing. This morning was really fulfilling. By a certain witch, an unmarried young woman. "After breakfast, let's leave this place," Luaccio suddenly said at this time. Maria was naturally a good choice. There was no better choice than this. For her, finding the golden dragon, solving the fertility problem of the golden dragon Fafnir, and receiving the reward from the Magician Association were the most important things. "Oh, right." Boss Luo smiled at this time. "Miss Maria, the golden dragon you're looking for is actually Teacher Milo-chan." "Oh, really? So Teacher Milo-chan is the golden dragon. What? Sister Long, where are we going? We haven't eaten breakfast yet. What a waste. I'm a little concerned about Hui Yao." After leaving the villa, Long Shirua stretched herself. "I've taken a look at the situation of the farm. Such a big thing happened, but Hui Yao didn't appear. That's a little strange." "Sister Long, do you mean that Mr. Hui Yao is in danger?" Long Shirua shook her head and said, "That's not it. Logically speaking, there are very few things that can really hurt him in the inhuman territory. I'm just a little concerned." She was concerned about the matter of purchasing Hui Yao's information through the intelligence channel last night. The information showed that Hui Yao had encountered some special opportunities. She could not think of any valuable opportunities that Hui Yao could encounter in this inhuman territory. That guy had already reached some kind of critical point through his own efforts. In Long Shirua's opinion, if he had not been dedicated to studying the inhuman territory, to build a space where non-humans could coexist, and if he had not been studying the essence of magic, perhaps he would have taken the last step long ago. Speaking of which, Long Shirua was somewhat unhappy. In Kelowna's system, there was no young leader among the new generation who could be comparable to Hui Yao. The only one, Lai Kaixing, had become the target of public criticism and had already left. Qing Xiazi could also do it, but there were too many mortal karma, and he himself did not seem to have the intention to break free from these karma. As for Fire Cloud Evil God, that reckless man's path was too wild. Whether he could live long was also a problem. Sun Shaoxing was originally hopeful, but this guy was drunk every day and only wanted to be happy. If it were not for the revival of the aura now, and the environment was very suitable for cultivation, he would not even remember that he could continue to cultivate. Blackwater was like a model nanny of the Demon Realm's cubs. There were too many unknown variables in Mo Xiaofei, and he was even related to Xianyuan Emperor's sword. As for Zhuifeng, he was the reincarnation of a greedy wolf. It was already fortunate that he would not embark on the path of chaos. Finding someone who can inherit is also like this. Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly smiled bitterly and subconsciously glanced at the little butterfly demon beside him. She was plucking a small flower on the road, then broke off the petals and put the flower core into her mouth to chew. "Sister Long, what did you say just now?" Kelowna's Shinryu just shook his head. He did not even think about the possibility in front of him. "Let's go." "Where is Hui Yao?" "I have some clues," Long Shirua said. Almost every place in the inhuman territory was under Hui Yao's construction. Then, only a few places that the entire inhuman territory system couldn't cover could provide Hui Yao with some so-called fortuitous encounters. The closest to here was undoubtedly the Lost Crack. As she was talking, Long Shirua suddenly pulled the little butterfly demon, reached out and covered her mouth, and then flew into the canopy of the nearest big tree. She made a gesture of silence to Luo Dance, indicating her to be quiet, and then began to look ahead. In the forest, several cloaked figures were moving forward at high speed. They soon stopped at the edge of the small forest. They were all wearing dark blue cloaks, field uniforms and goggles. The leader was a woman with a mechanical right arm. The mechanical right arm did not look very high-tech. It was made of a material similar to brass. Rather than calling it a mechanical arm, it would be more appropriate to call it a right arm that looked more like a suit of armor. She was using a monocular to look ahead. Ahead was the current location of the farm. Leader Marlene, we used such precious coordinates to come here this time. Is it worth it? The woman with the mechanical arm, who was called Leader Amethyst, put down the binoculars and said, "No matter what, David and the others have been sneaking into Torito's territory for a long time, but there hasn't been any news. Even if it is just to inquire about David and the others, it is worth it. Although the coordinates are precious, we still have a chance to live in the future. But one less companion is one less." Leader Marlene looked back at the people around her at this time. Since the agreed signal has appeared, something important must have happened. I have to confirm it myself. Understood. With that said, everyone moved forward again. But they didn't move for long before they were forced to stop. They saw dozens of figures rushing out of the forest at this time. Their faces tightened. Then, they stood back to back and put on a defensive posture. They looked around in shock and fear. They saw that these people were equipped with weapons they had never seen before, and they were expressionless. They couldn't tell whether they were friends or foes. Marlene. At this time, they heard a familiar voice. They were startled, and saw a man slowly walking out of the crowd toward them. David. David. It's you. As the leader, Marlene was surprised by David. She frowned and couldn't judge the situation at the moment. Who is this? David smiled bitterly at this time. Don't ask me, I'm also confused now. But someone told me to wait here, and I'll figure it out soon. Marlene's frown deepened. Who? David opened his mouth, and when he was about to say Anne's name, he subconsciously looked at the dozens of fully armed people around and changed his words. It's the goddess. The goddess who liberated Torito Farm. Goddess? Leader Marlene was stunned. David, are you sure you're not joking? David looked at the guards of the goddess who frowned because of Margot's words. He smiled bitterly and said, Probably not. Chapter 14:13. The leader of the Revolutionary Army and a few other Revolutionary Army soldiers were quickly invited into the farm by them goddess' guards. As for Kelowna Shinryu, who was hiding in the tree, he was not interested in the things that had nothing to do with him. He pulled the little butterfly monster and headed towards the crack of the lost. The forest suddenly became quiet, or maybe it was like that. Not long after, two figures suddenly appeared here. If one looked carefully, they were the vampire girl Elizabeth and the third miss of the Zhong family, Zhong Luoyue. Perhaps because of their good luck, why Elizabeth and Zhong Luoyue were happy to see what happened in the farm last night. The actual situation was that after the third miss met the Radiance Tower Master, she pulled the vampire girl to the side and earnestly lectured her. Of course, the movement in the farm was so big that they could see it from afar. Therefore, these two people who were not directly related to the Toraidu clan simply hid outside. It was only when the sun rose that he moved closer, intending to take a closer look. In fact, thanks to them in human domain, even with the body of a vampire, they could maintain a certain level of mobility during the day. Because there was no real sunlight, even if they were a little sleepy, they did not need to hide. However, the third miss was very curious. She couldn't help but ask, Why Elizabeth, why does the sunlight of the inhuman domain not seem to do much harm to us? The little girl could not explain. Originally, the number of times she entered the inhuman domain was quite limited. When her grandfather was still alive, he would not teach her such rare knowledge. She thought for a moment and said, I'm not very clear about this. But I heard from my grandfather that the one who created the inhuman domain was with the purpose of allowing all inhumans to coexist. So, probably because of this, the problem of sunlight was also considered? That was equivalent to not saying anything. Zhong Luoyue just nodded. However, he suddenly had a thought. It was true that the light source of the main world and the inhuman domain were all visible light. However, the damage that the inhuman domain could cause to vampires was almost negligible. Did this mean that the true source of damage to vampires was not pure sunlight, but some elements contained in sunlight? Ultraviolet, infrared, visible light. Ultraviolet or infrared. Just as he was thinking to himself, the vampire girl suddenly exclaimed in a low voice. Her voice seemed to contain a trace of surprise. What happened? The third miss could not help but be surprised. At this time, the vampire girl smiled and said, I can sense Brother Luochio, and I'm connected to him. Just now. Zhong Luoyue could not help but smile bitterly. It seemed that Elizabeth did not give up on using her telepathy ability all the way, but it turned out that guy was fine. However, Elizabeth immediately frowned a little. But Brother Luochio said that it's better for us not to enter the farm, because the farm is now occupied by humans. The entire Torito clan, there are only a few left. She had seen vampires before. When the powerful Torito clan resisted the mad golden dragon, she saw it clearly from the side. Thus, in the third young lady's opinion, humans, at least the captive humans in the inhuman domain, would not be able to resist the rule of the vampires, unless they possessed the destructive weapons of the modern human kingdoms. But obviously this did not exist in the inhuman domain. Therefore, when she heard Elizabeth's description, Zhong Luoyue instinctively did not believe that she and Elizabeth had only been away for one night. How did it become like this? However, when she thought of the various movements in the farm, she could not help but believe it. Most importantly, this information came from Luochio. This mysterious man she met in the Gambling Gods Manor in South America had too many unbelievable things about him that she could not understand. What else did he say? Zhong Luoyue pondered for a moment and asked. Elizabeth looked up and said, Brother Luochio said that as long as we don't enter the farm, now, it's fine. As for where to go, he did not say. He just said that as long as I like it, it's fine. What do you think? Zhong Luoyue looked at Elizabeth and asked. The little girl lowered her head and thought for a moment. Then, she looked up and said firmly, Let's go to the headquarters of the Magician Association. I want to become the student of the first Tower Master and become an excellent woman. Zhong Luoyue was startled and said subconsciously, I thought you would want to see that guy again. Elizabeth shook her head and said in a low voice, I feel that even if I'm by Brother Luochio's side now, I won't be of much help. I might just be a trouble. So, I want to go and improve myself. You will definitely become an excellent woman. Zhong Luoyue touched the vampire girl's head lovingly. Elizabeth smiled. Yes, I will definitely become an excellent woman. Maybe not as good as Miss Yi, but there will definitely be a time when Brother Luochio will pay attention to me. As for the fact that he already had Miss Yi as his girlfriend, it wasn't too important for vampires, because vampires had many lovers in the world of vampires. For example, Lady Eve, who turned Zhong Luoyue into a vampire, had more than 10 boyfriends. This was not a strange thing. On the contrary, it was very common. So, the next time we meet, I must become an excellent woman. She inwardly encouraged herself, and in an instant, she was filled with an unprecedented vitality. They quickly changed their route and then headed toward the headquarters of the Magician Association according to the map of the inhuman domain that Elizabeth had bought from the Torito clan earlier. Compared to Elizabeth's excitement at this time, the third lady felt a little pity. She felt pity for the connections she had built with many vampires in the Torito clan during this period. It was not only those so-called magicians who were difficult to deal with. In this way they gradually went far away with different thoughts. Margaret and her companions were quickly brought to one of the buildings in the farm, and settled down. Until now, when they saw the dilapidated scene in the farm, and those vampires who were caught alive and burned in the square, Margaret and her companions had to believe David's words. But even so, they still couldn't really believe all this. Not only did humans resist, but they also won this miraculous victory. They were waiting in this room. At this time, they were depressed. Even later, the comrades of the Revolutionary Army who were captured by the failed operation had arrived and met with Margaret and her companions. They were still at a loss about the current situation. In short, when we see this so-called goddess, we should be able to understand. Margaret, the leader, said in a deep voice, "Before that, let's talk about your operation, David." He only betrayed the memories before he became an adult, but he still remembered clearly what happened after he escaped from the farm and joined the Revolutionary Army. "We should have been betrayed." David frowned and said, "Otherwise we wouldn't have been caught in one net. But who is the one who betrayed us?" He glanced at the people in this operation but didn't see May's arrival. In fact, since she contacted Anne was arranged to stay in this place temporarily, May hadn't walked out of the door. "I can only think of the informant who was responsible for receiving us in the farm before this operation," David said finally. "The Revolutionary Army had a very mysterious identity in the farm of different clans. Only the leaders and the veterans of the Revolutionary Army knew about this informant. For the absolute safety of the informant, even the Revolutionary Army soldiers in the operation wouldn't know who the informant was. They also agreed to never meet each other and never take the initiative to recognize each other." "Impossible." Margaret shook her head directly at this time. "If the informant betrayed us, it wouldn't just be you. Even we would be in danger. But you have been captured for more than a month, and the Torito clan didn't test us at all." David lowered his gaze and didn't look at this woman who didn't look beautiful, had a face full of hardships, and even had a broken body. He whispered, then, "I can't think of anyone else. However, there's one thing that I absolutely believe in, and that's my companions in this operation." "This matter is a bit strange," Margaret said in a low voice, but she seemed to want to say something, but the door of the room was pushed open at this time. After that, a woman in armor walked in with her head held high. After Amanda, there were 6 well-equipped men who followed her in. They stood on both sides. After that, a woman in gorgeous clothes and a veil slowly walked in. "You guys go out first. I have something to say to these people alone. Amanda, you also wait outside the door," the veiled woman said in a cold voice. She had a special kind of majestic aura. Yes, goddess. She had to obey such an order. Although her eyes were so vigilant, she quickly left with her subordinates and closed the door. The veiled woman heaved a sigh of relief and then took off the veil on her face. She didn't look elegant at all. Her back was a little hunched, as if she was mentally and physically exhausted. "You!" Margaret stood up with her eyes wide open. Her face was full of surprise. "Goddess? Long time no see. Sister Margaret." "Goddess," and casually greeted at this time, then walked to the small bar in the room without saying anything. She poured herself a glass of water and drank it without hesitation. "Margaret, you know her?" David frowned. He suddenly had an extremely absurd premonition, and his premonition was quickly confirmed. "Her name is Anne. Her specific identity." Margaret smiled bitterly at this time. "She is the spy we planted in the farm of Torito clan." "How is it possible?" David's reaction was somewhat agitated. He subconsciously looked at Anne, this woman even, and waved her hand and said helplessly, "I didn't actually do anything to you, right? I just knocked you out and tied you up. You know, in that case, if you insisted on moving in the farm, only death would await you. I tied you up so that you wouldn't run around when you woke up, and waited for you to calm down. No one would go to that utility room usually. If you didn't loosen it, I could only say that you must have been lazy in your usual training. And if I really wanted to harm you, I wouldn't have knocked you out, but stabbed you in the back. Why didn't you reveal your identity at the beginning?" David couldn't help but frown. and said in surprise, "Didn't we agree that the spy would never show up? And Sister Margaret also promised me that even if you were in danger, I could watch you die. If I can't guarantee my own safety, then I'm sorry, I won't accept this job. I don't mind if you want to die, but don't drag me down with you." Such words were undoubtedly harsh to the ears of these ambitious soldiers of the Revolutionary Army. They all looked at Anne with strange gazes. But this goddess who had inexplicably gained many followers didn't seem to care about this at all. She yawned and said, "Also, if the situation isn't right, I can even betray all of you to get a chance to survive. I can even ignore everything and leave when I have the chance. Isn't that right, Sister Margaret?" Everyone looked at their leader. As the leader, Marlene slowly nodded and said helplessly, "We can't ask the spies to do more, and we can't give them any rewards or promises. This is the most I can agree to. The reason why every spy can still agree is probably because there is still a trace of kindness in their hearts. I'm just greedy for life and afraid of death. I can leave a way out for myself in the situation where I can please both sides." And didn't care about this at all. But did she really not have a trace of kindness in her? David wasn't sure about this. At this moment, he only felt that he was being played. He didn't speak, just kept silent, and tried not to let the people around him see his abnormality at this time. He needed to carefully protect everything about himself, including some changes in his body. Fresh blood. She was already feeling hungry. They didn't care about David. They were more concerned about the development of the situation, especially the leader of the Revolutionary Army. And Leader Margaret was silent for a while before asking in a low voice, "Can you tell me what happened tonight? Why did you become their goddess?" And thought for a while and said, "Sister Margaret, I'm afraid I can't tell you this. But as for what to do next, I've thought about it for a long time." "What do you want to say?" Margaret frowned at this moment and suddenly said seriously, "Big Sister Malu, I wonder if you plan to move that paradise of yours?" "What do you mean?" She opened her mouth and said indifferently, "I think I can provide enough protection for you now. Sister Margaret, let's declare war on the 13 families in the inhuman territory." At this moment, she wasn't the same person who poured a cup of water when she entered the door. She was more like the goddess of those humans outside the door when she came in with a veil. Chapter 14:14. The leader of the revolutionaries, Margaret, asked to have a private conversation with Anne, and Anne agreed without hesitation. There were only the two of them in the room. Margaret had been involved in the revolutionary work since 30 years ago. After she became an adult, she escaped from the clan's farm and built a human revolutionary army step by step. At the same time, she created a secret place where humans could live without being hunted by vampires. Today, Malu was almost 50 years old, but she gave off the feeling of a woman in her early 30s. Although her body was damaged, she always exuded confidence and determination. She was different from Anne. She knew that and was fickle, selfish, and would even waver between betrayal and loyalty. She was like a ticking time bomb. However, only such a person would take the risk to become a secret agent in the clan's farm. She wouldn't let the vampires discover her thoughts because she was no different from the other naturalized humans. She would try her best to please the nobles. However, the Anne in front of her was different from the Anne Margaret had known all these years, and didn't speak at first. She just looked at Margaret's right arm and suddenly said, "Sister Margaret, your right arm seems a little different from the last time we met." She slightly opened the palm of her metal right arm and casually clenched her fingers. She said indifferently, "I got some help recently." After a moment of silence and said, "In addition to the vampires of the 13 clans, there are indeed many freaks with special interests in the inhuman domain." She knew very well what this woman called Margaret had done in order to build the revolutionary army in the beginning. She sold her body to please some magicians with special interests, or volunteered to be the experimental subject of some wanted witches, and so on. She had done everything that she could and that Anne had never dared to imagine. "Speaking of which, it has been 3 years since we last met," Margaret suddenly said. Margaret suddenly said, "In the past 3 years, because of your secret information, we successfully saved 39 humans from the slaughterhouse of the Toreador clan. They're living a good life now. Although I didn't know you were involved, I still want to thank you on behalf of them." And waved her hand. "Sister Margaret, it's not the first time we've dealt with each other. There's no need to play the emotional card. Let's talk about it first." She pondered for a while and said, "If that's the case, how do you plan to cooperate? I can't send those humans that I saved with great difficulty to live here just because you conquered this place. You have to know that while it's true that you've conquered this place, there are still 12 branches of the 13 clans other than Toridu. The 13 clans only occupy the upper echelons of the vampire world. There are even more vampires below them. You might not know how many vampires there are in this world. Now that you've taken over this clan's farm, you've touched upon the fundamental interests of the entire vampire world. I'm afraid what you're going to face next won't be as simple as you think." And said, "I need more soldiers. I can provide them with enough weapons to fight against the vampires. Sister Margaret, if you don't declare war, how many people do you think you can save by yourself or the weak revolutionary army? How many people do you think are trapped in the farms of the big clans? 100? 200? You've done a lot in the past 30 years, and you've saved a lot of people. But at the same time, the number of humans who died in the hands of the 13 clans is far more than what you've saved." Margaret was silent, and continued, "The Revolutionary Army is still too weak after all. You don't have enough resources to develop and grow. According to the current model, you can only fight on a small scale and can't shake the foundation of the 13 clans. In order to not let the 13 ancient clans find you, you have to carefully hide. This naturally greatly restricts your development. Lastly, other than the humans who were born in the farm and were oppressed, who else in the inhuman domain would stand up to save the humans in the farm?" Margaret could only smile bitterly. She knew very well that what Anne said was the current situation, and sighed. "Let's say that the Revolutionary Army can remain undiscovered and you can continue to save individual humans. But have you thought about it, Sister Margaret? You're just a human. No matter how energetic you are, there will be a day when you'll be exhausted. We humans will get injured, grow old, and die. As long as the vampires can drink our blood, they don't have to worry about these things. So, you're confident that if you die one day, can the Revolutionary Army still be run as it is now?" She was silent again, and changed her sitting position. "Sister Margaret, your wish is to save all the humans in the 13 clans' captivity, right?" She nodded, and said, "If we don't start a war, ask yourself if you can take over all the humans here. I mean, the people who are following me now?" Margaret smiled bitterly. "There are many more humans in the 13 clans farm than in our stronghold. It's impossible to accommodate them in a short time." And said, "The Toreador clan has been beaten back by us. Although their Grand Duke hasn't appeared yet after this battle, almost all the upper-level nobles have died, and their elites have also been annihilated. So, whether you want to admit it or not, the war has started. So, whether you join us or not, I will still fight to the end." Margaret looked at Anne seriously and suddenly said, "You are a bit different." And said indifferently, "If I say I've already died once, would you believe it?" "I need time to consider," Margaret said slowly, and stood up and nodded. "Okay, but don't take too long. Because I really need people now. At least, before other vampires discover this place and plan to take action, I want to build this farm into a defensible castle." With that, Anne quickly walked out of the room. Margaret felt that the original Anne would appear less and less in the future until she finally disappeared. She would become the goddess of those people outside. Just because she died once. Margaret couldn't help but ponder. Sheed, is it really the golden dragon? Moreau, or Fafnir, was dragged out of the utility room at the bottom of the stairs by Maria with some difficulty. At this time, the golden dragon hadn't woken up yet. It seemed that it was not only knocked out by Kelowna's Shinryu, but it was also under some kind of Shinryu's restriction. This is the golden dragon, but I don't know if it's the one you're looking for, Miss Maria. Miss Maid said with a smile. This Master Pansy was so stingy. Maria didn't even know what she had done to offend her. But it was fine to accept it. There was no need to go against the wealth. So, Maria was more concerned about the golden dragon. The reason why the Magicians' Association couldn't find a mate for the golden dragon is that the golden dragon is a pervert in female clothing. It doesn't like female creatures? Maybe it's possible. Boss Luo suddenly smiled slyly. Miss Maria, if it's just a psychological desire, perhaps there's no need to use drugs. Maria rubbed her chin and muttered, It's the golden dragon, and it's also Milo Sauce. To be honest, anyone who has read Milo Sauce's column will think that she's a beautiful girl whose heart is about to explode. I actually admire a golden dragon in female clothing? She suddenly felt very confused. She felt that the little hope she had left as an older single woman seemed to have been shattered by someone. Maria suddenly quivered and slapped her thigh. Actually, this is easy. As long as there's enough aphrodisiac, even a sow can do it. Creatures can't go against their instincts. It doesn't matter if it likes a female or a male. It seemed that a certain Shinryu used this method at the beginning. Boss Luo couldn't help but have a subconscious thought. Are older women inclined to this simple and crude way of thinking? He even thought of Renziling and quickly came to a conclusion. If she also encountered this problem, she should have the same way of thinking. So from a certain point of view, Maria, Kelowna, Shinryu, and Renziling seemed to have the same way of thinking. What do you think? Give me some suggestions? Oh, sorry, I was a little distracted. Boss Luo smiled slightly. Well, I think it's better to solve the problem from the root. As for using drugs, it seems that the reason why the golden dragon wreaked havoc yesterday was because it was fed with a lot of so-called aphrodisiac. Someone has already tried it? Is it someone from the Magicians' Association? Maria seemed to be a little irritated as she paced back and forth. At this time, she had already forgotten that she was still in the clan's farm. All her thoughts were on the golden dragon. She suddenly looked at the Master Pansy that she had painstakingly invited. She had been in this craft paper bag for a day and a night, and had encountered so many dangerous things. She felt that it would be a waste if she didn't use this secret potion master. Master, you must be able to make a love potion that surpasses the 6-star level, right? Maria asked directly. Miss Maid seemed to have guessed the witch's idea. She thought for a while and said, This is your idea? There's nothing that love can't solve. Maria said with her chest out, As long as it falls in love with a woman, it will naturally have the need to have offspring. Actually, I think the Magicians' Association should have known about the golden dragon's problem and thought of this long ago. They just don't have the ability to make a secret potion that surpasses the 6-star level. Because this commission was directly proposed by Maria to Miss Maid, Boss Luo didn't intend to directly participate this time. He just wanted to be a bystander, although the final profit would belong to him and the altar. Miss Maid seemed to have noticed that her master intended to be a bystander. She glanced at the golden dragon and then looked at Maria. She suddenly smiled and said, Are you sure? As long as it's a love potion that surpasses the 6-star level. Maria subconsciously wanted to nod. In the entire world of magicians, there was probably no one who could refuse the work of Master Pansy. But she immediately stopped herself and asked carefully, Master, what's the reward for this secret potion? That's true. Miss Maid chuckled. Let me think. According to the previous rules, I'll prepare the materials. Maria quickly said, Of course, the reward will be calculated separately. I need you. Miss Maid said abruptly. Maria couldn't help but be startled and pointed at herself. Need me? Need me? Do you need me to do something? Master, just tell me, I'll try my best to complete it. No, I just need you, Miss Maid said indifferently, or another you. Teresa or yourself, both are fine. Maria frowned and asked tentatively, Master? So, do you need me or Teresa to do something for you? Miss Maid suddenly narrowed her eyes and said, It's a waste of time to play dumb. Of course, if you don't really want to complete this deal, it's fine. Maria broke out in a cold sweat. She had known about Master Pansy for a long time. She also knew that many people who had looked for this master to refine secret potions never mentioned it until now. She should have been very careful, but she actually forgot the terrifying side of this master when she saw this old cow eating young grass. It was because she was too relaxed. Master. Maria didn't look very good at this time. She asked tentatively, Can you change another condition? Miss Maid stroked her face and said, Yes. This condition seems to be a bit too much for him. After all, I'm not a demon. It's fine to change another condition. This master is so easy to talk to? Or is it because of love? Maria subconsciously looked at Luaccio, who was drinking tea next to her, and gave him a thumbs up in her heart, well down. Therefore, under Maria's anticipation, the maid slowly said, Since you want a 6-star love potion, as a reward, why don't you sell me all the love potion you have in your life? Maria's expectation fell through instantly. She froze on the spot. The mouth under the hood opened slightly, but she didn't choose to say anything in the end. You said you're not a demon? Chapter 14-15. Maria felt that she still wanted to struggle a little more with Master Pansy's request. However, Miss Maid didn't have any intention of bargaining. Maria had to look at Boss Luo for help, but she found that this little brother of hers didn't heal her this time. He didn't intend to do it himself. Forget it, it seems that I won't be able to earn this bounty. Maria shook her head. She just wanted to earn the bounty from the Magician Association. But there were many ways to earn money. She didn't need to agree to Master Pansy's request just for this one time. Young women don't deserve to have love. Can they sell their love as they wish? However, she finally understood why Master Pansy's products were sold at sky-high prices in the secret medicine industry. If every bottle of secret medicine made by Master Pansy had such a sad story behind it, it wouldn't be surprising. Are you going to give up the commission? Miss Maid asked indifferently. Maria smiled bitterly and said, I have to give up even if I don't want to. Although it's a pity to give up the bounty, it's not worth the loss. However, no matter what, I'm still very grateful for your company this time. Even though many things have happened. They would never force each other to make a deal. Miss Maid didn't say anything and just nodded gently. The identity of the secret pharmacist was just a game that she had once made. As for the deals that she had made because of this identity, it was just a matter of convenience. Her job was naturally to be the club's maid. Miss Maria, what do you plan to do? Boss Luo suddenly asked at this time. Maria thought for a moment and said, Well, I'll probably go to one of the neutral chaotic areas to see if there's anything worth buying. After all, the British border is now under sanctions, and the normal coordinates can't be used. Using illegal coordinates. Once, I have to get something. If I don't buy anything, my magic house will have nothing to sell. By the way, are you two planning to go back to the modern world now? Or do you plan to stay here for a while? Boss Luo casually said, Let's stop here for now. If there are no accidents later, we should be returning to the modern world. Maria nodded. She was just a witch who wanted to do business. Although it was a pity that the deal did not go through in the end, she was not too disappointed. As the saying goes, even if business is not done, there is still justice. Moreover, the other party was one of the 3 remaining secret potion masters in the world, and the most mysterious one at that. You will never understand what kind of great help knowing such a big shot will bring you in the future. After thinking for a while, Maria reached into her collar and took out a bottle. This is an unmarked coordinate. Maria gave the bottle to Miss Maid without hesitation. I can't let you come here for nothing. This unmarked coordinates will be the consultation fee this time. If you use it, you can enter the inhuman domain again at any time, even in Britain. Of course, master, you must know the use of this thing, so I won't explain it in detail. Looking at Maria's eager eyes, Miss Maid put away the unmarked coordinates with a smile. You're welcome. Seeing this scene, Boss Luo suddenly remembered something about Yu Yi. For example, she seemed to have different industries around the world. She also had this very mysterious bank account, and some strange collections and so on. She said that those were some trinkets that were given by some very enthusiastic customers in the past. It should be like this, right? Of course, Miss Maid also gave her own gift in return, a black card without any mark. She told Maria that if she wanted the secret potion in the future, she could contact Maria through the black card. Maria felt that it was a good deal. After all, she had hardly heard of anyone who could take the initiative to contact this mysterious secret potion master, so she was very happy to put the black card into her collar like a treasure. Then, I'll take my leave, both of you. She waved goodbye to Boss Luo and Miss Maid in front of the villa. In the end, she suddenly thought of something and turned back and said, By the way, little brother, if you really want to explore the tomb of the pharaoh, I suggest you find a local guy called Kaz to be your guide. In addition, he has a nickname, Golden Eyes. He is a local archaeologist who conducts research work. Golden Eyes? Boss Luo couldn't help but be startled. Yes. Is there a problem? Luochu shook his head and smiled slightly. Nothing, I just suddenly thought of something. Thank you very much for your suggestion, Miss Maria. The witch shrugged and then took out a magic wand from her collar. Then, she threw out 2 seeds and turned them into a pumpkin car. Then, she drove all the way to the nearest neutral chaotic area. What she didn't realize was that just because of her kind suggestion, there was a golden mark on the pure black card that Master Pansy gave her. Maria didn't know about the black card for now, because she was more concerned about another thing. When the pumpkin car was far away from the villa and the farm behind had become a black dot, Miss Maria suddenly laughed out loud. She tore open the cover of the craft paper bag and took a deep breath of fresh air. Then, she licked her lips and put her hand into her collar. After a while, she finally took out a small bottle. Boss Luo asked Miss Maid to give her a bottle of potion to help Teresa's recovery. At least I didn't get nothing. She couldn't bear to let go of the bottle. She held it up to her cheeks as if she was about to drool. This was also the work of the master, Pansy. Although it was only a recovery potion, it was still the work of Master Pansy. There was even her unique logo on the bottle. As for Teresa, she just lost a little blood. She would be fine after sleeping for a while. She didn't need to use any recovery potion at all. Even if she needed to, the ordinary recovery potions in her shop were more than enough. I'm rich. I'm rich this time. I'm really rich this time. After wiping away the saliva that was about to flow out, Miss Witch hurriedly took out a tool that could be used for instant communication from her necklaces. She contacted a very famous underground black market auctioneer in the Inhuman territory. Oh, isn't this the poor Maria? What do you want from me? I'm very busy. Thousands of secret crystals fall every second. I have a bottle of Master Pansy's work in my hand. It's at least a 4-star recovery potion and has a unique anti-counterfeit mark. Oh! Noble Ms. Maria, you're my mother. That was very real. At the old site of the Torito clan's castle, there was no trace of any vampires. There should have been a group of vampires left behind to rebuild the castle. He wondered if they chose to escape after learning about the Wu farm, or if they rushed to the Wu farm to provide support, but were ultimately destroyed by the humans who resisted. Of course, These were not important to Kelowna Shinryu. She came to the crack of the lost, pulled Luo Dance up and jumped down. Shinryu's ability to sense individuals was very terrifying. She had already sensed the aura of Hui Yao who had been here before. At the same time, the aura also went all the way into the crack. With her powerful spiritual sense, Kelowna Shinryu could almost find anyone except for a certain profiteer. However, what made Long Shirua more surprised was that when she was about to go deep into the crack, she saw a figure slowly flying out from the bottom of the crack. This was her purpose this time. It was the first tower owner of the Magician Association, Hui Yao. Kid? Teacher. I didn't expect that so many things would happen in Torito after I disappeared for one night. On the cliff, Hui Yao quietly listened to the simple narration of the true dragon of the divine land as if he was listening to the most profound grimoire. Even the first tower master suddenly felt that his brain was not enough to process all of this. He actually wanted to continue to stay in the quiet village in the thick fog, but there were too many things that he couldn't let go of. He planned to come out and deal with the trivial matters. Then, he would return to the mysterious village in the middle of the fog and continue to ask the mysterious person called Cain about the exploration of the world and time. Perhaps there would be a long closed-door training. Of course, he didn't forget that he had just intended to accept a student. Part of the reason for his temporary departure this time was to find a place for this student with extraordinary potential. Teacher, do you know why the humans in the farm suddenly had the power to resist and... The Radiance Tower Master frowned. They even crippled the Torito clan? It was to cripple them, not exterminate them. This was because Hui Yao knew that not every vampire would live in the inhuman territory of their respective clans. For example, there would be many vampires from each of the 13 clans who would join the highest inspection team. They were responsible for supervising those vampires who didn't abide by the rules in the modern world. There were also some vampires who chose to live in the modern world because they liked the life in the modern world. Of course, there were also vampires who worked in the modern world to take care of the clan's asset. In short, there should still be many descendants of the Torito clan. However, it was inevitable that the clan's overall strength would fall to the bottom of the valley. They might not even be comparable to some of the new vampire clans. You ask me? Who should I ask? Long Shirua looked up at the sky at this time. This is your territory, right? You don't even know. How do you expect me, a person who hasn't been here for decades, to know? Anyway, I'm just a leecher. It's none of my business. In fact, what else could it be? Of course, it was because of that profiteer who only knew how to flirt with the maid. However, Long Shirua did not intend to confess this matter. She always felt that if her cheap disciple and her future man were to fight, F***ck. When I return to Kelowna, I must find that scheming woman and have a fight again. The master of the Radiance Tower smiled bitterly and said, Teacher is still the same as always. All right, I'll pay more attention to this matter. He rubbed his forehead. Not only was there the matter of the Michael Association, there was also the matter of the Golden Dragons riot. Now, there was also the matter of the Torito clan. The master of the Radiance Tower suddenly felt that the idea of visiting Cain again in a short period of time seemed to be unrealistic. No matter what, Hui Yao slowly exhaled and sorted out the current situation. There's something that I need your help with. Say it. Long Shirua waved her hand generously. Hui Yao, on the other hand, said respectfully, Teacher, the riot in Fafnir this time has caused damage to many places in the inhuman domain and caused dissatisfaction among many inhumans. I think it's not suitable for Fafnir to continue staying in the inhuman domain for the time being. So, I hope that you can take care of Fafnir for a while. Actually, it's just to let it hide at your place for a while. The Shinryu of Kelowna seemed to be deflated and almost cursed out loud. Unfortunately, Hui Yao knew her weakness too well. He sighed and reflected on himself. He even said that as a student, he actually had to trouble his teacher, and that he was really too lame. And so on and so forth. It made Long Shiro swallow her words. I can take care of it. But I can't guarantee that I'll beat this damn pervert up until he doubts his dragon life if I'm in a bad mood. I think Fafnir will definitely cherish this period of time where he can listen to your teachings by your side. Hui Yao smiled casually. Long Shiro felt that there was nothing else she could say. Since it was her own fault, she could only clean it up herself even if she had to kneel down. Just like that, the Kelowna of Shinryu reluctantly walked back to the villa with the first pagoda master. Originally, Kelowna of Shinryu was worried that it would be difficult for her to explain herself if Hui Yao bumped into the profiteer and the scheming woman in the villa. However, she did not expect that when she returned to the villa, other than Fafnir, the two people were nowhere to be seen. They only left a note saying that they had gone back to the modern world first. Kelowna of Shinryu looked at the note. Her fingers were about to tear it apart, but in the end she sighed and folded the note carefully. Then, she stuffed it into her purse and sat on the sofa without saying a word. Last night, she sat in this place and said something to that guy. It was the first time she said something to him in thousands of years. Am I actually being dumped in a disguised way? Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly stood up. After beating up the unconscious golden dragon twice, he sat down silently and continued to stare blankly. She very well interpreted what she had said to Hui Yao. If he was in a bad mood, he might beat Fafnir until he doubted his dragon life. Brat. Yes, teacher. At this moment, facing Kelowna Shinryu, who was suddenly in a bad mood, the Radiance Pagoda's owner could not help but recall the painful experience of traveling the east to seek knowledge. He answered without thinking. Kelowna's Shinryu said sternly, "Tell me the exact location of the battlefield where you guys fought 100 years ago. I want to take a look at the battlefield." Teacher? The Radiance Pagoda Master was startled. Long Shiro said indifferently, "Are you going to say it or not?" The Radiance Pagoda Master had to say, "Since teacher wants to take a look, this student will certainly satisfy your request. How about this, after returning to the association, I will activate a direct transmission to you. We have sealed the battlefield and also established a direct transmission spell." Long Shiro nodded and stood up expressionlessly. "Oh, then let's go." Peter Chan impatiently walked around in the office, sweating profusely. He felt that there was something that he could not hide. Master Chiu and his girlfriend went out yesterday morning, but now it was already noon of the next day, and they had not returned yet. Peter Chan did not even have any way to contact them. He had already fooled Miss Sakura on the satellite phone yesterday. He felt that if he fooled her again today, he would not be able to keep his job. Back. Manager. That young master is back. It's downstairs." The subordinate rushed in at this time. Normally, Chunbide would have scolded the other party for being rude and not knocking at the door. But this time, he sat down and let out a long sigh. "Oh my God! She's finally back, this little ancestor. Mobile phone, M.O.M. No advertisement, Xionate 1 Sheen Zinc Sinkson Sheen. Chapter 14:16. A black shadow was moving rapidly in the sky. It was Black Dragon Ajuan, who had been forced to become a temporary mount. The most ferocious knight in history, Farrell, was standing on the dragon's head with his arms crossed. He looked ahead. The strong wind blew at his clothes and hair, but it did not move his feet. There are traces of battle nearby. Farrell suddenly looked down at the ground below. Huge destruction could be seen everywhere on the ground. It could be seen that the person who did this had reached a very high level of power. This is Fafnir's aura. Black Dragon Ajuan, who had always been resentful of being ridden by Farrell, could not care less about this shame now. There was a hint of surprise in his voice. Farrell said, "It's just a bit like Fafnir's aura. Fafnir is not so weak." Black Dragon Ajuan simply rolled his eyes and said in annoyance, "Old lunatic, Have you been locked up by the knights? Old Fafnir died of a serious illness not long after the battle. The current golden dragon is his descendant. Unfortunately, it's a pervert. In fact, I always thought that old Fafnir died so quickly because he was angered to death by this unfilial son. Farrell was silent for a moment, then said indifferently, "How is the new golden dragon compared to you?" Audiobook snorted. "That guy inherited less than half of the golden dragon's power. You can beat him however you want." Farrell said, "Old Fafnir inherited less than 20% of the golden dragon's power in the beginning, but he can still stand shoulder to shoulder with Roland. The new golden dragon has good potential." Black Dragon Audiobook frowned and said, "Old lunatic, although I don't know what you want to do, it seems like you want to pull a team out? Did you run into some big trouble?" "They are back." "They? Who?" The Black Dragon could not help but be stunned. "That group of demons." Black Dragon Audiobook was silent at first, then his body stopped high in the sky. This surprised the Soul Witch and the granddaughter of the Sword Saint, who were chatting on the dragon's back. After a while, Audiobook slowly let out a breath and asked tentatively, "Old lunatic, so you haven't recovered from your illness?" It was very clear what had happened when Farrell had gone berserk. At that time, Farrell had almost abolished the entire knight system. It was only after a few heroes had joined hands that Farrell was able to regain his composure. Among them was its master, Sword Saint Roland. Audiobook had seen Farrell's crazy side before, so he had no choice but to fear this crazy old man. At the same time, he also carefully accompanied him. "I can't beat her. If I can, how can I just let any random cat or dog ride on my body? If it was a second person, they would have long been burned to ashes by its dragon flames." But after Black Dragon Audiobook said that, he regretted it immensely. Farrell's illness was the one thing he hated the most. He was even prepared to flee with Leia at any time. Farrell would really beat it to death if he went berserk. Unexpectedly, what he imagined didn't happen. Farlier looked ahead with bleak eyes. After a long time, he said faintly, "I'd rather it was me who was sick. That way, I could even end my own life." "Farrell, you..." The Black Dragon opened its mouth and wanted to say something, but it couldn't say anything. Farrell shook his head and said calmly, "Let's change the route. Kuraloa isn't in the werewolf territory. He seemed to have left not long ago, probably in that position." Farrell pointed in a certain direction. The Black Dragon knew that this crazy old man had superhuman senses, so it wasn't too suspicious. It just followed the direction Farrell pointed and found that it was the road to the 13 Clans territory. Why did this old man Kuraloa go to the 13 Clans territory? To pick a fight with Balegang? "Old lunatic, please show me evidence that can make me believe it," Audiobook suddenly said. Audiobook suddenly said in a low voice, "Otherwise, I won't let Leia get involved in danger. This is my last promise to Roland." He didn't say anything and just sat cross-legged on the Black Dragon's head, then closed his eyes. But in fact, when they arrived at the Torito clan, they still didn't find anything. From entering the Inhuman territory to the castle to look for the Sword Saint, to the Magician Association to look for the secret steel, and then to Kuraloa in the werewolf territory, it was as if fate was playing a joke on Farrell. No matter what, he was always one step behind. Before sunrise, the ancient city of Pompeii was as quiet as a battlefield after a fierce war. Of course, it referred to the ruins of the ancient city. With the ancient city as a development site, the homes of the Aborigines living around it were still very lively, but even the people who lived nearby for generations couldn't see the true appearance of the ancient city of Pompeii. This included the tourists who had traveled thousands of miles, and even the archaeologists. Because the ancient city was surrounded by a large enchantment specially built by the Magician Association to seal off the battlefield of the Great War 100 years ago. Kuraloa and Secret Gang arrived at dusk and opened multiple layers of enchantments. When the enchantments were completely opened, they still didn't wait for Balegang's arrival. This cunning vampire is rarely late. Kiroloa quickly gave his opinion. Torito's territory has just been attacked by the Golden Dragon, so Baelgang must have a lot of mundane affairs to deal with. Let's wait a little longer, it won't make a difference. The master of the secret steel tower was quite calm. Kiroloa waved his hand and walked directly into the real battlefield. He said casually, "Iron Lump, why don't we take a stroll inside first? I haven't been here for 80 years, I kind of miss it." He participated in the Great War 100 years ago, but he was obviously not the only one who participated. There were many excellent werewolf warriors among them, and there were even some who were better than him. Kiroloa asked himself if he was lucky enough to survive. He wasn't the strongest werewolf, so he was able to survive. Many of his fellow werewolves were buried here, and there were even some comrades whom he had a pretty good relationship with. The secret steel tower didn't intend to stop Kiroloa's movement, but instead followed silently behind. The streets of the inner ancient city were crisscrossed and extended all the way, and a majestic castle could be clearly seen in the distance. That was the place where the inhuman allied forces of Eurasia had last attacked. Like a meat grinder, it had swallowed the lives of many elite Inhumans. Kiroloa seemed to see the sword flashes 100 years ago. He walked and stopped, holding a pen from time to time to write his mood in his handbook. He had already smelled the scent of death, and his life would come to an end at any time. He might want to complete a work at the end. In fact, Kiroloa's wish before he died was very simple, and there were only two. First, as a warrior, to experience a hearty battle, regardless of winning or losing. Second, to write the last work of his life that he was most satisfied with. Speaking of which, why hasn't the Magicians' Association repaired these destroyed streets and buildings? Kiroloa asked curiously as he turned back. The secret steel tower master said indifferently, "Anyway, there's a barrier here and ordinary people can't enter, so we're too lazy to repair it. Besides, ruins, ancient cities, and the like are valuable because they've been through a lot, right? If they're repaired, this part of history will be covered up." Ha ha ha! Kiroloa patted the shoulder of his former comrade, who was serious in speech and manner. "I didn't expect you to have sentimental moments. I feel like I can write an autobiography for you." "Thank you very much. We're good friends. Don't be like this. Don't refuse." Kiroloa leaned close to the secret steel tower master's ear, as if he was begging. It seemed like that, but what he said was, "Secret steel tower, does your association still have people on duty here?" The secret steel tower master's expression didn't change as he walked calmly with Kiroloa, but he also said in a low voice, "No, the magicians are only sent here when the barrier needs maintenance. And I'm the one in charge every time. So, besides you and me, there are other guests here tonight, right?" "Probably." As they spoke, a shadow attacked, and a loud bang suddenly rang out. On the street, a sandstorm rose into the sky, and Kiroloa and the secret steel tower master calmly dodged it. They were warriors who had been through hundreds of battles, and naturally wouldn't be ambushed so easily. At this moment, they were more concerned about who was attacking them. It should be noted that the barrier was opened by the secret steel tower master, and only the two of them had entered. Before that, theoretically speaking, there shouldn't be anyone inside the ancient city. Kiroloa and the secret steel tower master landed almost at the same time. As the dust began to disperse, a shadow slowly walked out of the dust, and slowly appeared, and then appeared in their sight. "This is? Caddy?" Both Kiroloa and the secret steel tower master were shocked at the same time. They stared in disbelief at the person who walked out of the dust and suddenly ambushed them. In front of them was a warrior who held a large shield and a greatsword, and this warrior also had very obvious orc characteristics. This was an orc warrior, and an orc warrior that both Kiroloa and the secret steel tower master knew. Caddy. A name that had been far away from them for 100 years, but they would never forget this name. In the coalition army 100 years ago, The orc warrior named Caddy was like the strongest shield, always blocking the enemy's attacks for his companions. Caddy always stood in front of everyone and never retreated. He used his shield and his body to block for his companions until the end. Even when he was exhausted, he still didn't fall. Even when he was dead, he still stood. Kuraloa, it's not Caddy. The secret steel tower master frowned at this time. Caddy's body has been taken away, so it's impossible for it to still exist. Look carefully, this is just a spirit. Grayish-brown skin, soulless eyes, and a body that was faintly translucent. Kaloya could see everything clearly. However, the figure in his memories evoked too many memories, so much so that he was momentarily unable to extricate himself. Kuraloa took a deep breath at this time and was on high alert. Suddenly, he said, "It seems that, whether it's true that the demons have returned or not, this place is really strange." At the same time, Kuraloa's eyes quickly swept across the surroundings. The secret steel tower master also sensed it. He flipped his palm, and a light ball for illumination rose from his palm, instantly illuminating the surroundings of the long street. Under the illumination of the sufficient light source, they suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. Those were the figures of their comrades who had perished in the final battle, those that they could all call out by name. They were like the dead who had returned from hell like ghosts, emerging from different places one after another and gradually advancing. What the hell is this? Kuraloa was now drenched in cold sweat. Such a strange thing made it difficult for him to keep calm at this time. The secret steel tower master forced himself to calm down and quickly said, "Maybe someone is playing tricks here. They can't be our former comrades, because after they died in battle, even their souls were devoured by the demons. We can't find anything at all except their corpses." Kuraloa roared at this time and stepped on the street. Suddenly, a crack extended forward. "Which bastard is it? How dare you blaspheme the souls of these heroes here? Get out here. I will never forgive you." But the spirits in front of him in the form of warriors who had died 100 years ago did not seem to hear him. Under Kuraloa's roar and step, they seemed to be stimulated by something and attacked Kuraloa and the secret steel tower without hesitation. The attacks of these spirits were shockingly powerful. They did not even look like spirits, but living warriors from 100 years ago. "Iron Lump, how dare you say that you come here once a year to maintain the barrier? Tell me, where did these guys come from?" Faced with Kuraloa's accusation, the secret steel tower master could only smile bitterly. The only thing he could do was to think about how to survive the attacks of so many spirits. "Kuraloa, if the appearance of these guys is the precursor of the demon's return," the secret steel tower master suddenly said solemnly, "after 100 years of recuperation, will the demons become stronger than before?" "How would I know?" Kuraloa said angrily. "I just know. Even if the demons have not become stronger and are still the same as they were 100 years ago, we may not be able to stop them. The new generation is too weak." The secret steel tower master was silent for a moment before he said, "Back then, there were still many who did not fight. Other than me, there were several tower masters, the 13 Grand Dukes of the clans, your Beast King and some hidden witches, and the Vatican. F***ck. Those guys you're talking about?" Kuraloa snorted coldly. "Except for the Radiance clan, I've beaten up all of them 50 years ago. Do you think I can't beat them? Don't you know what kind of quality the new generation of the inhuman domain has?" The secret steel tower master smiled bitterly again. This was the last smile he gave Kuraloa. Because in the next second, the secret steel tower master's head was cut off by a sharp sword, right in front of Kuraloa. Without any warning, the secret steel tower master died. Iron Lump. Chapter 14:17. When the head of the mithril tower master rolled on the ground and finally stopped at Kaloya's feet, the old werewolf and old hero who felt that he had seen through life and death suddenly realized that he had not seen through life and death at all. He hoped that he could die before his family and friends. But he did not want them to die before him, because he was about to die in the first place. According to human age, Mithril Tower Master was actually not young, more than 150 years old. But in the inhuman world where there were longevity potions, Mithril Tower Master was a magician in his prime. He was already the Tower Master of the Association's Secret Arts Tower, and he should be shouldering the overall situation for the Magician Association in the future. His future disappeared. Just like that, he disappeared easily and without warning, erupting with grief and going crazy with anger. At this moment, Kaloya instantly turned into a 3-meter-tall, hairy giant wolf that walked upright. He crazily knocked away the spirits of his former comrades who were besieging him. Their strength was still the same as before, or at least the strength of their attacks was the same. But they did not seem to have the ability to think quickly, and they simply unleashed their powerful strength. Kaloya did not choose to tragically slaughter his way into these spirits. He simply snatched back Mithril Tower Master's corpse at once, and then madly rushed out of the core of the ancient city. He was not afraid of anything, but he needed to bring Mithril Tower Master's corpse away from this place. Because he was afraid that one day, Mithril Tower Master would also become like these spirits in the inner city. Behind him were the spirits of his former comrades who were chasing after him. Just as he was about to reach the entrance of the barrier, Kaloya subconsciously looked back. Looking at the huge ancient castle in the deepest part of the ancient city, the fear that he felt when he fought against it 100 years ago once again struck Kaloya's heart. The entrance was just ahead, and perhaps he could leave in the blink of an eye. But Kaloya did not have the means to close the barrier. He was not a magician and did not understand the complicated things of a magician. If he really wanted to fight, he would use his fists and body the most. Would these spirits also rush out of the barrier? What kind of effect would they have on the outside world after leaving the boundary? These weren't things that Kaloya could think about in detail right now. He could not die in this place. At least, he had to take the body of the secret steel away. At least, he had to send everything here back to the inhuman domain. At least, he could not let the Inhumans suffer a disaster without knowing it. At least, he had to give them some time to prepare. What if they really did come back? Finally, Kaloya rushed out of the barrier's entrance. He suddenly stopped and then nervously observed the situation at the entrance. Time passed bit by bit. A drop of cold sweat slowly slid down his hairy face. But in the end, he didn't see any undead warrior rushing out of the barrier. He saw that these revenant warriors had even crowded at the entrance, but they did not choose to come out. Instead, after a while, they began to gradually turn around and disperse, finally disappearing into the inner streets of the ancient city. Kaloya stared at this scene in a daze, his body shrinking little by little. He removed his berserk state and only felt that the sea breeze before dawn was especially cold. Right at this moment, "Kaloya, what are you doing here? The entrance has been opened. Where's the secret steel man?" He heard the voice, hugged the corpse of the secret steel, slowly turned around, and looked at Balegan, who was slowly descending in front of him. The acting Grand Duke of the clan silently listened to Kaloya's account of the horror he had experienced half an hour ago without saying a word. In the end, Kaloya stopped talking and just dealt with the corpse of the secret steel man with a sorrowful expression. He found some small props from the secret steel man's body and fixed the head and body of the secret steel man. He even broke off a stone pillar of the ancient city and polished it into a stone coffin to put the corpse of the secret steel man in. At this moment, Balegan suddenly moved. He walked to the entrance of the barrier. Kaloya could feel that there was an invisible and strange force moving around Balegan. This was a spoil of war that Balegan obtained from the castle in the war 100 years ago. It had always been mysterious, and no one knew what function this spoil of war had. "Are you going in?" Kaloya couldn't help but ask in surprise. He thought that Beyligan was going to activate this mysterious spoil of war and explore the ancient city himself. Beyligan shook his head. No, I'm just going to block this entrance temporarily. The method of operating the barrier has always been in the hands of the association. I can't close this entrance, so I can only block it. Although you said that those souls don't know what they are willing to do and don't choose to come out, it's not a good thing to keep the entrance open. Oh, you're still thoughtful. Kaloya nodded and then picked up the stone coffin. Coordinates are still open. I plan to send the corpse of the secret steel man back to the association first, and then tell the Radiance Tower Master about this. What about you? Beyligan pondered for a moment and said, Then I'll stay here and watch this entrance. Someone needs to stay here to guard. Then I'll leave it to you. Kaloya didn't say much. He held the stone coffin, jumped up, and soon disappeared into the boundless night. Beyligan watched his former comrade leave. He slowly sighed, and then he gently snapped his fingers. On the stone floor, a black shadow suddenly condensed. The black shadow gradually emerged and formed a shape little by little. It finally turned into the shape of the secret steel tower master. Just like the souls of the dead inside the ancient city. Beyligan waved his hand at this time. The secret steel tower master beside him turned around with empty eyes and then walked into the entrance of the barrier. He walked into the ancient city inside. After a long time, Beyligan slowly took out a black card from his clothes and stared at it for a long time. 100 years have passed, traffic control in Fog City had been restored. Basically, because of the intervention of the Magician Association in the end, after casting a drizzle with a forgetting spell, ordinary residents didn't remember the terrible things that had happened in Fog City. It was still the birthplace of the British style that travelers from all over the world were familiar with. Peter Chan had just finished a video call with Miss Ing and immediately rushed to the most luxurious suite of the hotel. He came to deliver the tickets to the most important guest of the hotel. Master Chiu, we have booked the tickets for you tonight. There will be a special car to take you to the station when the time is up. Peter Chan knocked on the door and entered. Thank you. Luoqiu smiled at the manager who greeted him well. Miss Maid took the 2 tickets from Peter Chan's hand. But obviously, she didn't want to greet him. In fact, according to the original plan, Boss Luo would stay in Fog City for 1 night and then leave. Now there were 2 more nights. Of course, this didn't delay his time. On the contrary, Boss Luo had a very comfortable time in these 2 extra days. Oh yes, there's a letter here. It should be for you. Peter Chan took out a letter from his suit pocket, but there's no name on it, only the room number. I think it should be for you. Miss Maid took it, opened it and glanced at it casually. Then she nodded and said, It's indeed for us. Thank you, Mr. Chen. You're welcome. Chen Bai did not stay here for too long. After delivering the items, he found an excuse to leave. In fact, he was going to prepare for his paid vacation. This was something that Miss Ing had casually agreed to. It was really great, wasn't it? Who's the letter? Luoqiu asked curiously. Miss Maid smiled and said, Lael. In front of them was a park with few people. When Boss Luo and Miss Maid arrived as tourists, there was already someone waiting for them, the orc girl Lael. Today, the little beastman girl was dressed more like a man. She wore a cap to cover her beast ears. At this time, she was leaning against a statue. She seemed to be bored and was counting the ants on the ground. Miss Lael, we meet again so soon. Boss Luo would always greet first, no matter who was on the other side. Hearing this, the orc girl seemed to be startled. She looked over in a panic. When she saw that it was the master and servant in casual clothes, she was relieved. She even looked at the 2 people in front of her strangely. Turned out that there were times when they wore normal clothes. You. Hello. She quickly got rid of this strange thought in her mind. Then she stiffly bowed at a 90-degree angle in front of the master and servant. Thank you for taking care of me last time. I can't thank you enough. Actually, we didn't do anything. Luocchio smiled casually. Miss Lael, aren't you tired of bowing like this? It turned out that the little orc girl had been maintaining a bowing posture without raising her head. She then said cautiously, I heard that in the eastern countries, if you want to express your gratitude, you have to be like this to be considered sincere. Eastern. Boss Luo smiled. The place where I grew up is not that far from the east. You don't have to be so cautious. Besides, maybe I should say thank you. Because Miss Lael and your companions really put on a wonderful show for me. The orc girl's face flushed red. Thinking of her gigantic image and the weird clothes, she wanted to find a hole to hide in. She wanted to die. Please forget about it. I'm using my lifetime of gratitude to beg you. This orc girl was a little shy. She didn't dare to raise her head. Boss Luo smiled and said casually, Miss Lael, why did you call us out this time? Mainly to thank you for your help. The orc girl calmed down and raised her head slowly. After hesitating for a moment, she said slowly, Also, there's another thing. I don't know how to do it, so I hope I can listen to your advice. Let's hear it. Boss Luo turned his eyes. Lael thought for a moment and said, It's like this. After that night, someone from the night organization came to me and said he wanted to invite me to join the night organization. It's that night Dr. Bedivere. He said that I seem to have the ability to appease the berserk orcs, so he hopes to form a music tactics team and let me be the first generation member. Boss Luo and Miss Maid looked at each other. They were a little surprised, but they soon felt relieved. It seems that Mr. Bedivere has a very interesting idea. Boss Luo thought for a moment and said, But he should not only invite you, right? The orc girl nodded. Well, except for me, the other members of the band were invited that night, and my brother Oga was also invited. What's their answer? Lael said, Will and the other two agreed at the beginning, then that Mr. Ching said he still needs to think about it, and then it's Oga and me. Oga meant for me to make a decision, and I haven't made up my mind yet. So, I want to hear your opinions. Well, logically speaking, we haven't known Miss Lael for a long time. Luocchio smiled and said, Why do you want to hear our opinions? The orc girl looked away from the boss's eyes and looked at the pool at the side. She said in a low voice, Because it's very reliable, and then I always feel that I will get the right answer, and it's different from others. And what? Miss Maid asked with a smile. The orc girl quickly waved her hand and said, Nothing. I just feel that you two are much more knowledgeable than me, and can probably analyze whether it's good or not. Actually, I'm just asking. If you two think it's troublesome, please don't mind. It's nothing, Boss Luo said indifferently, but we'll charge for this kind of consultation. Lael, please think about it carefully. The orc girl was stunned and looked at the pair in front of her with confusion. They were always so mysterious that it made people want to explore more. She said subconsciously, But I originally didn't know, so I wanted to ask, Is there a charge for this? Boss Luo chuckled, then slowly took out a coin from his pocket. It was just the most common coin in Britain. Luocchio flicked the coin to the orc girl. She subconsciously stretched out her hands to catch it and held it in her hands. This is? Luocchio smiled and said, There are free options. I'll give this coin to you. Use it to make a decision. Agree to it on the front and reject it on the back. Of course, the opposite is also possible. The orc girl was stunned on the spot. Can it be like this? But isn't this too childish? She couldn't help but frown. Boss Luo said, If it's a matter of indecision, whether it's yes or no, it has a certain weight. Since both sides have their own advantages and disadvantages, at least it means that both sides are equal. Since it's equal, the opportunity is naturally equal. So, Miss Lael will still think it's childish. The girl held the coin in her hand as if she didn't fully understand. After a while, she suddenly put the coin to her mouth and bit it hard, leaving a small tooth mark on the coin. Then, she threw the coin into the fountain in front of her. Dong! The coin had entered the water. She looked up at the boss and Miss Maid, saying seriously, "I don't know whether it's heads or tails now, but in fact, I already have the answer in my heart. I just want to get recognition. I'll come back here later and pick up the coin to see if the decision is right." She bowed 90 degrees to the master and the servant again. "Thank you." Boss Luo smiled. "In fact, I didn't do anything. It's your decision." The orc girl was still straightforward. She raised her head and showed a brisk smile, blinking her eyes. "An uncle who worked on the farm told me that some people won't tell you what to do, but they can let you know what to do. Because as long as they stand in front of you, they will make you feel good. If you feel good, then no matter what you do, it's the beginning of success. So, goodbye you too." She ran away energetically, and her figure gradually disappeared from the park. What a spirited young lady! Miss Maid chuckled. She walked to the fountain in front, looking at the coin that had sunk to the bottom of the pool and reflected the sunlight, suddenly saying, "Will it be picked up by a tramp? How can it be?" Boss Luo smiled and then snapped his fingers. Since then, no one in the park had noticed the existence of the fountain. It stayed there quietly, and then there was a 50p lying at the bottom of it. No one knew whether it was heads or tails. Chapter 14:18. The train soon left the fog city and headed toward its destination, Losi. There was no train station in the famous university that Boss Luo claimed he was going to attend. He needed to arrive at Losi and take other means of transportation to get to St. Andrews. Of course, this was a carriage specially prepared by Peter-chan. It was not too shabby, and it could even be said to be the best VIP seat. At least so far, this carriage was quite quiet and comfortable. Originally, according to Peter-chan's intention, it was not a problem to book the entire carriage, but Miss Ing insisted on only buying 2 seats. He did not understand the thoughts of the princess of the group, and he did not know that the princess of the group made such an arrangement because Luoqiu was not the kind of person who liked to book the entire carriage. In short, the service in the VIP carriage was quite good. Miss Maid sat next to the boss. Boss Luo was reading a book bought from the bookstore at the train station under the dim light of the reading lamp. It was a book about ancient Egyptian culture and refinement. The servant girl would answer some questions for her master from time to time. Of course, maybe Cleopatra will know more about this. After answering another question, the servant girl pushed the gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of her nose and said, "That's right, the servant girl was dressed as a professional teacher at this time. When did she change her clothes? Even the train attendants did not know. Would the 2 of you like something to drink?" The stewardess walked over at this moment and asked with a comfortable smile. Luoqiu thought for a while and was about to order milk. Suddenly, a man's voice came from the seat not far behind him. The man's voice immediately attracted the attention of the passengers in the VIP carriage, and they all turned their heads to look. They found that it was a very fat man. He gave people the feeling that he might be stuck in the chair. However, the man was wearing brand new clothes that looked expensive. His hair was combed neatly, and so was his beard, which looked carefully groomed. There was a white handkerchief hanging in the chest pocket of his suit. He seemed to be a very well-educated person. He was around 50 years old. The man said, "Oh, the beautiful lady in front, please give each of the beautiful ladies here a glass of gin liqueur and a whiskey for the gentleman who's doing it. I've just encountered a happy matter, and I hope that everyone can share this joy with me. People generally don't reject the good intentions of others, especially for such a reason that is not worth rejecting. In the beginning, if one wanted to share, they probably couldn't avoid it. So they were soon pleased with the generosity of the gentleman, without gratitude, of course. Nobody here cared about the price of this little bit of wine. Most of the people in the carriage were either rich or noble. Of course, a curious customer immediately asked, "What's so good about it?" The man said happily, "Our servant just called me and said that my beloved pet, Lisa, just gave birth to 3 little cuties. My family has 3 new members today. It seems that he is a person who loves pets. This instantly won the favor of many women in the carriage. In fact, since the man started to treat, he had already won the favor of many people. Some people clapped their hands because of this happy thing of the man. Looking at the man who was smiling happily in the midst of many people's blessings, Luocio was no exception. He gently applauded for him. Miss Maid just looked at him with a smile. Nouveau riche. Just because his pet gave birth to children, is he afraid that others don't know how rich he is? That was a murmur from the seat in front of Boss Luo. Of course, the sound was instantly obliterated in the laughter of the crowd. Perhaps only the people in the seats next to him could hear it. Thank you for all your blessings. The man nodded to the crowd, and then slowly sat back in his seat, like the lead actor of the final curtain call of a stage play. He pulled the curtain down on this little episode. Soon, the stewardess served drinks to all the guests in the carriage, according to the man's request. Perhaps it was an illusion, or perhaps it was something else, but the atmosphere in this carriage, which was originally a little quiet, seemed to become a little livelier. They could hear the passengers talking in a low voice. As for the man who treated them, at this time, he had closed his eyes and quietly leaned against the seat with a faint smile on his face. It seemed that he was resting, or had fallen asleep. When the stewardess passed by, she carefully covered him with a blanket. In the seats in front, the club master and servant pair withdrew their gazes. They each picked up their cups, and then gently clinked their cups, smiling at each other. It took nearly 6 hours for the train to slowly enter the railway station in Losi. Because it was early in the morning, there were not many passengers. The exit was particularly deserted, but there were already some people waiting here early to receive the guests. The friend who was arranged by Peter Chan to receive Boss Luo was also in the crowd. All the itinerary had been arranged. Boss Luo could rest in Losi for a day, and then set off. In fact, it didn't even take an hour to get from Losi to St. Andrews. Excuse me, are you Master Chiu? The person in charge of receiving them was Asian, and he even spoke Mandarin more fluently than Peter Chan. My name is Jin Zhongyuan, nice to meet you too. Manager Chen has already told me, so I will receive you two next. Thank you. Boss Luo nodded. According to Jin Zhongyuan, they would stay in the best local hotel for the next day. As for why it wasn't Song Dynasty's hotel, it was because Song Dynasty didn't have a branch in Losi. However, because of the hotel alliance, the hotel they were going to stay in would also provide the best service. The car was already parked outside the railway station. Jin Zhongyuan was very enthusiastic, and he saluted Boss Luo and Miss Maid and opened the car door. When they got in the car, Luoqiu met the man who treated everyone on the train. He also got into a black car. The car wasn't cheap, at least it looked like it was of the same level as Boss Luo's car. This forthright and generous man met Boss Luo's gaze at this time, so he showed a polite smile, nodded, and got into his own car. This was the second time Boss Luo and this man had eye contact. Master Chiu, what's the matter? Jin Zhongyuan followed Luoqiu's gaze and looked at the car that drove away first, and suddenly said, Do you know the gentleman just now? Luoqiu shook his head. I just saw him on the train, not really. Jin Zhongyuan didn't care and just nodded. That car seems to be the special car of the hotel we're going to next. Maybe you can meet again today. Boss Luo smiled and didn't say anything. The car door was opened by Jin Zhongyuan, so Luoqiu held the servant girl's hand and let her get on the car first. Then he got on the car himself. The car left the railway station. It was about half an hour away from the hotel. In human territory, a farm, the territory of the Torito clan. Maybe this place shouldn't be called the territory of the Torito clan anymore. Farm shouldn't be called farm anymore. The believers had started to discuss this issue. It seemed that the idea of renaming this place came from Master Amanda. Master Amanda was the most loyal person of the goddess, and she was the most pious person favored by the goddess. Since Master Amanda thought so, the goddess must have the same idea. Therefore, from the beginning of the discussion, there was an uncontrollable situation, of course, as the goddess body, and didn't know about this at all. She was now busy discussing with Sister Margaret, the leader of the Revolutionary Army, about the merger of the two sides. Yes, the merger of the two sides. The leader of the Revolutionary Army didn't think too much about Anne's proposal. After a simple discussion with her companions for half a day, she got the answer, yes. And her believers had the power to defeat the Torito clan, which was many times more powerful than the Revolutionary Army they had been running all these years. Most people even thought that this would be an important opportunity for humans to defeat vampires in the inhuman territory. It was a chance to gain true freedom. That's all, Sister Margaret. And rubbed her eyebrows. Is there anything else that you don't think is appropriate? It's already very good. Leader Margaret heaved a sigh of relief. She felt that she was really lucky. Simply from the conditions proposed by Anne, she felt that the Revolutionary Army was completely taken care of. What the Revolutionary Army needed to provide was to participate in the battle when needed. That was all. However, the Revolutionary Army was originally fighting against vampires, so naturally they needed to fight. So, this kind of cooperation was equivalent to no sacrifice at all. This made Margaret feel that Anne's kindness was quite unreal, but she couldn't think of anything else that Anne would want from the Revolutionary Army. Force? The Revolutionary Army didn't have the power to defeat the 13 clans. Manpower? Manpower was barely acceptable, but the number of believers under Anne's hands was far more than the number of humans in the Revolutionary Army's territory. And seemed to have seen through Sister Margaret's doubts, so she said slowly, "In fact, in addition to participating in the battle when necessary, I also hope that the Revolutionary Army can be teachers and teach my people some other knowledge. Sister Margaret, you also know that these humans under my command have just been liberated. They don't know anything about the outside world, the world outside the farm. They even lack a lot of common sense, so I really need experienced people like you who can teach them unconditionally." She observed Margaret's expression at this time and continued, "Of course, this is not a necessary obligation, nor is it a forced. It can only be considered as my personal request. So, it's up to you whether you agree or not." Margaret smiled bitterly. "To be honest, in front of your conditions, I don't even have the courage to refuse your request. And teaching the liberated humans about the outside world is what we have always been doing. Even if you don't say it, or even if I don't order, my companions will take the initiative to do it. So you can rest assured." "That's great." And Xing clapped his hands and smiled. For a moment, Margaret seemed to see the exquisite egoist, and she knew, but only for a moment. "Right, there's one more thing," and suddenly said mysteriously at this time. Margaret sat up straight and said seriously, "Say it." At this time, and blinked and said half-jokingly, "That is, whether it is Sister Margaret or the people of the Revolutionary Army, don't try to ask about the supplies I provided and the reason why I did some things that are beyond common sense. Because, once curiosity breaks the mystery, the magic will disappear." Margaret looked at the playful and in a daze, then nodded slowly and said seriously, "Okay, I promise you. I'll tell my companions about this. Thank you very much." And smiled and clapped her hands. "Since the alliance has been formed, let's celebrate a little." She asked Amanda, who was waiting outside the door, to bring some good drinks. The human chefs who served the farm had now become the goddess. She became the goddess in front of everyone again. Even Margaret, who had been the leader of the Revolutionary Army for 30 years and experienced countless things, couldn't look straight at Anne's Majesty at this moment. "By the way, Sister Margaret, do you have a channel to sell pure blood?" "Selling pure bloods?" Malu frowned, and shrugged and said, "Yes, it's the sale of pure blood. Sister Margaret, there's no need to hide it, right? There are so many people in the Revolutionary Army base that need to be fed. In the past, you only relied on yourself to sell. How much can you earn?" All of you, more or less, sold your own blood behind the scenes, right? The leader was silent for a while before saying, "What do you want to do?" and licked her lips at this time. "Now we have conquered the farm. You know, in the slaughterhouse, there are many pure blood products that have just been produced, and there's a considerable amount of inventory. Even the wealth of this clan is in my hands, so—" Seeing the change in Sister Margaret's expression, Biao laughed and quickly said, "I'm super rich now." The leader of the Revolutionary Army felt that all these years were wasted. Chapter 14:19. The light door opened, and the first tower master of the Magician Association slowly walked out. This was Hui Yao's private teleportation room in the association's tower. Therefore, when Long Shiruo and the little butterfly monster walked out, they did not see anyone. As for Fafnir, after it was packed up, it was casually thrown aside by the Kelowna Shinryu. The owner of Hui Yao's tower wanted to say something, but in the end, he swallowed the words in his stomach. "Teacher, if you're not in a hurry to rush to the battlefield site, please allow me to deal with the association's affairs first." "Well, 2 hours will do." "Oh, go ahead." Long Shiruo nodded casually. Naturally, she would not really disregard this cheap disciple of hers. Besides, she also knew that Hui Yao must have a lot of headaches at this moment. After all, so many things had happened in the past 2 days and nights. As a role similar to the guardian of an area, there were indeed too many extremely troublesome problems. This was probably the reason why this Kelowna Shinryu became more and more lazy after the Kelowna administration in modern Kelowna appeared. However, the atmosphere in the association at this time seemed to be a little different. Shinryu, who had just walked out of this exclusive room, immediately noticed this. Hui Yao, on the other hand, also felt that at this time, the association seemed to be shrouded in a sorrowful mood. He immediately summoned a magician from the association for questioning, and finally received a shocking piece of news. The Mithril Tower master of the association was dead, and the legendary werewolf hero Kuraloya had personally carried the body of the Mithril Tower master back. "Bring Kuloya to see me." Long Shiruo saw a murderous look on Hui Yao's face at this time. She knew that this good-natured guy was really angry. Naturally, she was embarrassed to mention her previous request again. At least, she would not take the initiative to remind him. Fog City, somewhere at the dock. After the patrol officers had left, leaving only 2 of them behind to watch the news, the harbor was particularly quiet in the middle of the night. Of course, the light pollution of the city did not let this small quiet place go. However, the watchmen didn't care. The 2 watchmen stayed in the small room, eating Walker's potato chips, drinking beer, and watching reruns of XX Explosion. Occasionally, they would let out some silly laughter. At this time, a yacht quietly approached this remote dock. The yacht seemed to belong to some rich man. From afar, one could see some expensive interior decorations. At this time, inside the yacht, there was a group of people wearing combat uniforms, preparing to log in. There was also an old man among them. His face was pale and bloodless, like a candle flickering in the wind, as if he would die at any moment. This old man was Mr. House, who had mysteriously disappeared for some time. He looked at the approaching dock. His eyes seemed to have recovered a trace of vitality. He was getting closer to the opportunity that could bring him back from death. After crossing the entire hemisphere, he was finally about to reach his destination. At this time, on the deck of the yacht, Nan Xiaonan was enjoying the sea breeze, silently gnawing on a piece of chocolate of an unknown brand. "I remember that you didn't like to eat sweets in the past." A man's voice came from behind. Nan Xiaonan didn't look back. Hearing the voice, she knew that the person behind her was Qin, who disguised as Tang Tianlin. "If people don't make some changes, they will be abandoned by the world," Nan Xiaonan said casually. He didn't know that his identity had been seen through long ago. He didn't even know that the Nan Xiaonan in front of him was no longer the one who worked in the same research institute as him, but a guest from another time and space. He just looked at the back of the woman in front of him thoughtfully. Just like back then, it was a pity that a few years had passed. As the yacht was approaching, he finally said, "Get ready to go ashore. There will be accurate information about the perfect man soon. I hope everything goes well." Nan Xiaonan shrugged and walked past him without any hesitation. Not long after, when the theme song of the TV series, The History of Everything, was played again, figures had quietly entered the dock and quickly disappeared into the night. The car slowly drove into the entrance of the hotel. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. In fact, they could have arrived earlier, but the guests in the car asked for a tour of the city. Jin Zhongyuan naturally had no objection to this. The better he could serve this Master Chiu, the higher the reward he could get from Peter Chan, right? "Here we are, two of you. Alec Hotel." Jin Zhongyuan opened the door for the two people in the back seat and did what he could diligently. Boss Luo got off the car and helped Miss Maid out of the car. After that, he glanced around casually. At this time in the morning, many guests were preparing to check in. In front of the Alec Hotel, there were already many people waiting, and it was quite lively. It was said that this was an old hotel with a long history. Of course, because of its long history, it used to be called a hotel. Suddenly, a roar came from the sky, and a helicopter slowly came and then landed on the tarmac. Jin Zhongyuan casually said, "Oh," and glanced at it. Most people were curious, and then didn't pay too much attention to it. Perhaps only the concierge in front of the hotel would pay more attention to the helicopter, because the concierge knew that the last guest who chose to come by helicopter was last month. And the guest last month was generous and noble, so he was a VIP who couldn't be offended. Soon, someone went to receive the VIP who came by helicopter. With the help of the concierge, a fat man slowly walked down from the helicopter. Because of his body shape, this man seemed to leave a deep impression on people at first sight. Jin Zhongyuan also saw him, and said subconsciously, "We really see him again so soon. Right, Master Chiu?" Boss Luo naturally also noticed the man who came down from the helicopter. At this time, he just smiled casually at Jin Zhongyuan's question, and then slightly bent his arm so that Miss Maid could easily hold it, and then walked into the Alec Hotel. Jin Zhongyuan carried the luggage and followed closely behind. He had received a lot of distinguished guests, because Peter Chan often introduced some guests that the Song Dynasty Hotel couldn't take care of in the local area to him, and let him be a guide. Therefore, he came in contact with many famous gentlemen, and naturally his vision was higher than ordinary people. But he didn't see how this Master Chiu was noble, but this Master Chiu's female companion really revealed a kind of awe-inspiring nobility from the bones. But even so, even though he couldn't see how noble she was, Jin Zhongyuan felt more nervous than when he received a member of the royal family. Not noble. Noble? Jin Zhongyuan shook his head, and suddenly thought of the fat man who came by helicopter. Simple, Jin Zhongyuan only felt that this man was essentially different from the famous gentleman he met. He was more like an ordinary person who suddenly had a lot of money. Maybe he was a guy who was lucky enough to win the lottery and then squandered it. Thinking of this, Jin Zhongyuan suddenly remembered that this man seemed to have taken the special car of the Alec Hotel to leave the railway station at the beginning. When did he change to take a helicopter? Just for a high-profile appearance? Maybe he was really just a vulgar nouveau riche. Jin Zhongyuan didn't pay much attention to it. When he was about to arrive at the front desk, he took the lead to go to Boss Luo and Miss Maid to check in for them. Coincidentally, the fat man who came by helicopter also came to the front desk under the reception of the concierge, and was about to check in. "Mr. Dillings." Jin Zhongyuan heard the receptionist call the fat man Dillings. This was a name that Jin Zhongyuan had never heard of. But there were too many rich people in Britain, so it was not surprising that he didn't know, not to mention that if he was really a lucky guy who won the lottery, he naturally wouldn't have heard of him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Dillings, the room you booked is not ready yet. You still have to wait for at least 3 hours, because the guest in the room hasn't left yet. Oh, that's really unfortunate news. Fat man. Dillings didn't show much displeasure on his face. He just slightly shook his head. But obviously, I don't want to waste my time waiting for this kind of thing. I'm really sorry. I'll check if there is a similar type of room for you right now. The receptionist at the front desk quickly said. Dillings smiled. It doesn't matter, but I only want the best room. I changed my mind. Arrange a presidential suite for me here. The waitress suddenly opened her mouth, as if she didn't expect this. Then, she looked at her colleague who was checking in for another guest. This colleague was checking in for the hotel's presidential suite for the guest. Jin Zhongyuan listened to her with no expression on his face, but he sneered in his heart. I'm sorry, Mr. Dillings, the presidential suite has been reserved. The receptionist at this time could only look at Dillings with a bitter smile. And this guest is right next to you. I think there is a similar room here. Of course, the price will be much lower. Do you want to take a look? Di Lindsay still didn't give off the feeling of being overbearing. Instead, she seemed to be joking. Miss, do I look like someone who would be distressed over money? But since there is already someone, then I can only give up. She was very grateful for the customer's understanding and quickly began to do the service. She peeked at Dillings and found that there seemed to be a trace of pity in his eyes. Feeling pity for not being able to stay in the presidential suite, the world of the rich is really wonderful, she thought. If you don't mind, we can give this suite to you, Mr. Dillings. Jin Zhongyuan couldn't help but be stunned. Because at this time, the mysterious Master Chiu spoke. Jin Zhongyuan turned around in surprise, looked at Boss Luo puzzledly, and even sent out a questioning signal. You want to give this room to me? Dillings was obviously very surprised by this matter, and asked in astonishment. Boss Luo said with a smile, of course. Dillings frowned and thought for a while, and asked in confusion, but why do you want to give this room to me? We don't seem to know each other? Luoqiu said casually, just take it as a reward for the gift on the train. Mr. Dillings, thank you for treating me and my girlfriend to drink, and for sharing the joy with you. So that's it. Mr. Dillings nodded with a trace of apology. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you at first. My memory is bad recently, and I often forget some things. It's okay. Luoqiu waved his hand. Then, I wish you a happy holiday. Dillings might be a believer. He looked at Boss Luo and said with a smile, God will be willing to bless you too. I hope so. Boss Luo didn't comment. Jin Zhongyuan soon followed Master Chiu's order and changed the room. Until they entered the elevator, he asked curiously, Master Chiu, why do you want to give this room to that nouveau riche? Luoqiu also asked curiously, Mr. Jin, why do you think he's a nouveau riche? The elevator was open, and they could see the situation in the hotel lobby. Jin Zhongyuan casually pointed at Dillings, who was still handling the formalities at the front desk, and shrugged. You see, this gentleman has been looking at the decoration of the hotel all the time, right? Indeed. Boss Luo didn't deny it. Jin Zhongyuan continued, although the decorations here are considered luxurious, there is still a big difference compared to the real rich people's houses. It can even be said that it can only be said to be ordinary. Very few rich people would be amazed by such decorations. Usually, only ordinary people show this kind of expression when they come here for the first time. Well, they have never seen the world. Mr. Jin, it seems that you are very good at observing people. Boss Luo suddenly smiled. Jin Zhongyuan said proudly, I've been working as a guide for the rich, so naturally I know a little. It's actually nothing special. Luoqiu just smiled politely, and then looked at the crystal chandelier in the hotel lobby as the elevator slowly rose. Dillings was also looking at the chandelier at this time, and no one knew what he was thinking. Maybe it was as Jin Zhongyuan said, the really rich people rarely pay attention to such decoration. Or, ordinary people rarely pay special attention to such a crystal chandelier. The crystal shines because of the light. Some people think it's like a diamond, so most of the time, people use it to pass it off as a diamond. Probably.